Hello everyone, welcome back. Get comfortable, relax, and enjoy today's exciting fanfic. Now, let's begin part 1. For the majority of his miserable existence, Uzumaki Naruto had always been known as the number one hyperactive ninja. Not once has he showed anyone his weak side, not once did he burst under the unbearable pressure. He was what most people would call a naive little man who knew less than his share of common sense. That, however, was all about to change. One very seductive female admirer, secret lover, was about to educate him in the ways of intercourse and what it would mean to forever obtain the one thing that the young man was missing in his life, a demon that loved him. Naruto was still single at the beaming age of a swift 17 years, he had no one to share his life with, nor did anyone dare to share theirs with him. The villagers harbored hatred for him. It was something that, as more time passes, the sorer it would get. Naruto had more than his share of brutal beatings when he was young. Even to this day people still give him glares that could cripple. It always made him uneasy. Naruto had never done anything that deserved such treatment. Other people committed crimes, but never got anything close to what he received. Vandalized property, smashed windows, nightly beatings. It had all become routine for the young dreamer. Tired of complaining about his conditions, Naruto took to changing himself. The only way anything was going to be different was if he took a stand. Training under a rigorous schedule, he had gained some major improvements. An extremely well-toned physique, loss of baby fat, and a new appearance altogether had ultimately made the man the top bachelor of his village for the past 5 years. Attractively tall and slender, Naruto had a feminine build. Naruto's hair had grown over the years, it was now barely past knee length. He had gotten quite tired of the same hairstyle and decided that a change was in order. According to him, it was more mature. Well, whatever the reason, Naruto instantly became more popular with the female population because of it. For a while, life for Naruto went back to being as normal as he could have it. That was when it became even better. Tsunade adopted him. It was sort of strange at first. He had never taken the fifth to be a mother type. When asked why she did such a thing, she went with, "You've never been accepted by anyone, I want to be there for you." Hearing this, Naruto felt indebted. Tsunade was taking a huge risk in taking him in. It could very well mean the end of her career as Hokage after all. Little did he know, however, that he was about to meet his secret admirer. Once Naruto was under the loving guidance of Tsunade, his old habits immediately died. Whether it was willingly or unwillingly, one by one his likes and dislikes changed. He no longer wore his orange jumpsuit, for it was thrown out by Tsunade the day he moved into her house. Instead, a white t-shirt, dark blue shinobi pants, and a bandana of pure red were forced on him. His headband also had some slight alterations. No longer securing it around his forehead, it usually found its place around his arm. That was, of course, unless told to do otherwise. He was Tsunade's little piece of sunshine whenever they were alone together. For years, Tsunade had been trying desperately to get her boy married off with some of the fine specimens that adorned the Konoha streets. Take for instance, Anko and Kuranai. In fact, they still tried everything to snatch Naruto to be theirs forever. Naruto, however, had other business on his youthful mind. Training 24/7 for example, and every so often, trying to sneak a couple of bowls of ramen whenever he could. Tsunade still tires to pry Naruto away from his favorite food and induce upon him a liking for more sophisticated dining. The new multi-level restaurant that Choji's clan opened up was such a place. They do pride themselves on their cuisine. Inside Naruto's mind, Naruto-kun, I want to see you from outside these stuffy confines, Naruto-kun, you will be my and my only. Naruto's secret admirer smirked as she seductively sucked on her index finger. After many years of being sealed inside Naruto's body, Kyuubi had not only grown immensely fond of her host, but came to acquire one key piece of information about her, Naruto-kun. He loved demon woman. Having knowledge of this, the Kyuubi immediately brightened up. She fits the description of being a female demon herself. Smirking at this fact, she knew that it wasn't going to be too difficult. All she had to do was wait until the right time to break out. The rest would handle itself. Contrary to popular speculation, the Kyuubi was indeed a female to begin with. She was not at all a bloodthirsty demon. Actually, quite opposite really. She was like any regular girl. Rarely showing her discontent around others, there were only two conditions in which she would become berserk. Number 1, if she was provoked, and 2, unless of course her Naruto-kun wanted her to be. In fact, she was a very caring woman that solely belonged to her host. She was antisocial and sometimes horny, but that was in her nature. It's so unfair, I live inside you every day and yet I can never get any closer to you. In a spark of both mischief and determination, Kyubi set up her plan. That's it, I have to break out of this lamenting confinement. With that, Kyubi smirked and set to work. Outside in the real world. Naruto-kun, stop moving. A very irritated Tsunade shouted as she smacked her boy's head. Sorry Tsunade-sama, Naruto retorted defensively to avoid being hit again. Standing at attention, he daren't goof off again. That's better, now I will teach you the final stages of your medical training. As Tsunade said this, she coursed some healing chakra through the palms of her hands. With precise control and chakra manipulation, she morphed it into an absolute offensive style. The lime green color took on some eerie changes as it pulsed periodically. I will now teach you how to kill with medic chakra. No sooner had she said this did she smash 100 pieces of moderately sized wood planks. Naruto stared in amazement, letting his curiosity run free with possibilities. Tilting his head, Naruto questioned the specific execution behind that technique. Tsunade-sama, how did you do that? As if furthering his adorable expression, he put his index finger to his lips. Finding his antics extremely likable, Tsunade demonstrated her appreciation. Walking over, she hugged her son, giving a nice hair ruffing in the process. Naruto, I have taught you almost everything I know. From ninjutsu to genjutsu, even medic jutsu. Once you learn how to kill using medic jutsu, I will have something that I want to talk to you about. Tsunade then turned and headed back as she showed Naruto exactly how to gather the desired chakra levels and then how to release it for a crushing impact. Naruto took no time mastering the technique that his mom had shown him. Going through the steps again and again as a proud mother stood watching her son with teary eyes. Inside Naruto's mind, oh how cute, I loved his face so much when he tilted it. Kyubi laughed as she brushed her perfect fingers through her long radiantly red strands of hair. Her body was perfectly proportioned and she had that could rival Tsunade's. Her legs were long and smooth with absolutely no blemishes. The small patch of hair just above her sweet spot looked visibility soft. I'll be out very shortly, Naruto-kun. Kyubi's body was unique in that, she was born with 4 purple stripes altogether, 2 on her inner thighs and 2 on the sides of her stomach. Her eyes were a dark red and heavily coated with seductive purple eyeliner. On her head, 2 cutely shaped fox ears wiggled while an elegant tail swayed behind her. This was one fine female demon that had her sights set on Naruto. She wouldn't take no for an answer. Her beautiful feet were further complemented by finger and toe nails of a creamy white, each coated perfectly even. Kyubi wore a very skimpy fur skirt with a matching top to conceal her. She didn't want to cause Naruto pain, but if causing him pain was the only way to be with him, then she had to do it. Whispering a small teary-eyed apology, Kyubi commenced her plan. Outside Naruto's mind, Naruto was still practicing his technique when suddenly his whole body heated up, he felt lightheaded. His stomach churned inside out and within seconds, he was on the ground convulsing rather furiously. From the inside, Kyubi's expression was one of pure torment. She really wanted to use a less extreme method. Naruto-kun in pain was not something she wanted to witness. So deciding to speed up the process of her release, Kyubi worked even more efficiently. This course of action immediately caused Naruto to experience something very unpleasant. Tsunade, noticing that her son wasn't feeling well, immediately called on some of his friends from nearby to take him to the Konoha hospital. She herself soon accompanied them. Tsunade intended to personally inspect the cause of her son's irregularity. It was just too mind-boggling that something like this could happen, out of the blue. Gathering her training equipment for later, she jumped into the trees following in hot pursuit. Tsunade didn't understand how this was possible. One minute Naruto was doing well, the next he's collapsed. It was all too strange. At Konoha Hospital, give him some room, Neji shouted as he glanced a worried look towards his best friend. He was sweating a storm. Naruto has never ever been sick once in his life. The suddenness of this problem was a bit unsettling. Clear out of the way, Sasuke declared as he supported Naruto's underside. Sasuke had once betrayed the village of Konoha. In a blind chase for power, he goes with Orochimaru for nearly 2 years. Throughout that time, he had begun to see the error of his ways. When the second attempt at bring him back arose, he gladly went back with his best friend. In many ways, Sasuke considered Naruto his brother and probably his only available family. Since Itachi died after Sasuke had confronted him while under the guidance of Orochimaru. Sasuke had now mastered the Sharingan, he was able to read his opponent's moves perfectly, giving him an overwhelming advantage while in battle. After his brother's death, he became the next true heir of the Sharingan. Naruto's friends had taken him to a secluded room followed shortly by the Hokage. Not caring for the disruption she would cause, Tsunade charged through the door. "Is my baby alright?" Tsunade's expression was that of worry as she glanced down at his perspiration. "Everyone clear out of the room, now." No sooner had Tsunade ordered the dismissal of her fellow Junin shinobi had she began to assess the condition of her Naruto-kun. "You hang in there, you hear me?" Her voice was cracked, a mixed tone of desperation and agitation. Tsunade had gone through her checkups to find that something was defiantly not right. Her boy had a fever of 123 degrees and was on the verge of convulsing yet again. "Crap, this isn't good." Tsunade hurriedly rushed out of the room. Whatever this new upset was, she knew she couldn't act fast enough on her own. She needed some assistance. Shizune was the only available person right now. Sakura would have been her next choice, but she was on a mission right now. She had limited resources to choose from. Just then, a blinding flash of red caught her divided attention. With a grunt, Tsunade rushed back towards the hospital. Inside Naruto's room, after the red flash had subsided, it also succeeded in bringing out the Kyuubi. Her plan had worked, and now standing before a very shocked Naruto was the most gorgeous woman he would ever lay eyes on. The Kyuubi's beauty surpassed all other females. She had no comparison. Catching her host's dumbfounded expression, Kyuubi attempted to pull him from his daydreaming. Her soft lyrical voice ranged through the enclosure. "Naruto-kun, I can finally be with you now." With that, Kyuubi jumped Naruto, hugging him like a cute plushie. She humped every part of his body in a show of suppressed affection. Kyuubi's been waiting a long time for this. He didn't know what to do. More specifically, Naruto was still trying to register what just happened. "Okay, after that flash, this hot chick appears and dry humps me, what is this?" Not really getting the desired reaction from her man, Kyuubi decided to get his attention. "Is this how you treat someone who's been sealed inside you all this time?" "Naruto-kun," she prolonged her pronunciation of his name as she shook his body. "Someone who's been sealed inside my body, what is she talking about?" Then realization dawned on him. He knew exactly what she meant now. "You're the Kyuubi." Naruto's excitement at the fact that the Kyuubi was a hot chick was impeded by the fact that he was freaked out by now. "Naruto, don't you remember me?" She was hit rather hard. He didn't remember her after 17 years of living, eating, sleeping, and training with him. It was surprisingly a bittersweet moment. All Naruto could do was hold her with increased strength as he was too bewildered to let go of her, not that she minded. "Naruto, I forced myself out of my imprisonment just to see you." The Kyuubi then buried her face in his chest and started sobbing uncontrollably. "I was so lonely without you. I did this just to be with you, please recognize me." The Kyuubi cried as she begged for his acceptance. It took a few minutes for Naruto to register what had just happened. Until finally he came to his senses and shouted out, "Holy crap, you're the Kyuubi." Realizing who she was, Naruto couldn't help his next action. Desperately trying to push her away from him, Naruto struggled in vain. Seemingly rejected, the Kyuubi only cried harder as she latched herself onto his shirt. "Naruto-kun, I love you so much, why are you doing this to me?" The broken scene of the Kyuubi in front of Naruto finally hit his soft spot. He cradled her in his arms and gently soothed her back. Taking in her heavenly scent, Naruto had immediately succeeded in terminating her water show. "Shish, it's alright, I won't reject you." Naruto was still unsure of why he wasn't freaking out at the demon in his arms. It did devastate his village, yet somehow he knew he was doing the right thing. He stroked her back as he gently muttered words of encouragement. He just hated to see a vulnerable woman in front of him. "Naruto-kun, please, I love you so much. Don't seal me away. I want to share my life with you, if you will let me do so. Kyuubi blissfully muttered under the soothing touch. It was so comfortable that she could fall asleep and not awaken until hours later. I don't have a choice in the matter, I'll have to let you live with me, you have no one else to turn to. However, we will have to change your name, we can't call you Kyuubi. The villagers will hate you and me even more so than they do now. Naruto's voice had a hint of rage hidden within them. Then care to tell me what my new name is, Naruto-sama? Kyuubi asked playfully. Did Naruto just hear her right? Did she just call him Naruto-sama? Kyuubi, from now on, while in public your name will be Kyusai. This way they won't know it's you that's the demon. Naruto kept his voice a mere whisper, he didn't want other people eavesdropping on their conversation. Hi Naruto-sama, then from now on, I shall be known as Kyusai. In return, all I want you to do is let me stay with you and also acknowledge my undying feelings for you. Kyuubi's voice was full of playfulness now as she rested on her Naruto-kun's strong chest. Whatever you say, Kyuubi, Naruto replied as he gently slipped one arm behind her back and brought her lips into his, sharing their first of many French kisses yet to come. As Tsunade approached the door, she ordered her Junins to check on Naruto after that display of light. All she got were perverted grins with equally perverted blushes. This was going to be interesting. Their lips met and never parted again, each taking in the sweet aroma of their counterparts, never ceasing to take a breather as if once they part ways they will never again encounter the perfection that is each other. Kyuubi had finally found her eternal bliss that was her Naruto, but still one thing remained on her mind that tormented her thoughts. Did her Naruto-kun feel the same way that she did about him? She was too caught up in the heat of the moment to have noticed that Naruto had unfortunately released her from his loving grasp. Kyuubi, I also needed to tell you that while you're in public vacancy, you will have to retract your tail and ears. Naruto let out a slight chuckle as he continued, it's hardly normal for a human to attain animal-like features. Naruto released Kyuubi and looked into her mesmerizing ruby orbs that had little marks of black within them. Naruto-kun, I have told you that I would be yours and nobody else's, so whatever you want, I'll do. Kyuubi then attempted to snuggle back into her Naruto-kun's arms but was rudely interrupted by someone possessing chocolate orbs and blonde hair trying to barge into the door. Noticing the furious turning of the door handle, presumably from a very agitated Tsunade, Naruto took the immediate initiative to hide Kyuubi. Quick! Get under my bed sheets, Kyuubi. Before Kyuubi could have a say in the matter, her whole body was flung under Naruto's bed sheets, which, after having the opportunity to be graced by his presence, smelled just like him. It was a lingering pale lavender essence that made Kyuubi flustered at the first sign of it. This was partly due to the closeness between her and her current oblivious counterpart, but it was also because Naruto subconsciously placed a very warm hand on her behind while his other hand rested upon her waist. It was indeed very comforting for her. Naruto was her protector. Mere seconds later, Tsunade came sprinting in to check on her son. Are you alright, Naruto-kun? Tsunade inquired quizzically, yet a bit worried. Naruto, who at this time felt that Kyuubi's head was just above his private section, was also somewhat blushing. Nothing is wrong. Naruto almost shouted the last part due to the fact that Kyuubi's hand had just moved to envelope his waist while still managing to somehow stay hidden under the bed sheets. Tsunade, who had taken account of Naruto's elevation of tone, looked at him suspiciously along the edges of her eye. You seem to be really agitated today, Naruto, is something bothering you? Tsunade seemed to catch another of Naruto's many signs of uneasiness this morning. Moving to Naruto's bedside, she leaned down so that Naruto's ear was at her eye level. Taking a few seconds to adjust her voice, she whispered a very motherly tone into Naruto's ear. Don't be afraid to come and talk to me, Naruto-kun, I'll always have time for you. Tsunade then straightened up while she smoothed the wrinkles on her clothing, afterwards proceeding to the exit of the room. When she got there, she turned around one final time and looked at her Naruto with his trademark grin plastered on his face. Smiling, Tsunade blew a kiss to her son as she took her leave. Talking ensued on the other side of the door, and soon the voices became but a distant blur to the two people inside. Upon realization that all is well, Naruto signaled for the release of the Kyuubi from within the bed sheets. The first thing that Kyuubi did was envelope her Naruto-kun within a loving grasp, which shocked him, but later he eased his way into her sugary embrace. Thanks for protecting me, Naruto-kun, and you have a fragrance that no one else has, the kind that makes all demon women fall into an eternal state of tranquility. Kyubi said with a hint of pain in her voice. The harsh reality was that if she couldn't have her Naruto-kun, then no other demon temptress could. She loved and treasured him beyond all bounds. Thanks, I think. Naruto laughed as he resumed telling Kyubi how she was supposed to act while in public for a good 10 minutes or so. Outside on one of Konoha's many streets. Let's go back to Tsunade's grand domain for now. I have something I want to give you. Think of it as a present. Naruto told Kyubi, who at this time was riding on Naruto's back while Naruto secured 2 hands upon her warm thighs that craved for the gentle touch of her blonde angel. Naruto took extra care in concealing her tail and ears with some bed sheets he took from the hospital, after making sure that they were free of infectious diseases. They were leaping with extreme speed from rooftop to rooftop, all the while Kyubi's hair kept on getting into Naruto's face, preventing him from getting a proper view of his surroundings. Kyusai, can you try and keep your beautiful hair under control? Naruto's voice was soft and gentle even though he was a bit annoyed inside. It took Kyubi a moment to figure out that that was the name she was supposed to be called while in public, so deciding that pursuing this matter further was not an option, since she didn't want to disappoint her Naruto-kun. She immediately responded. Oh, sure thing, Naruto-kun. Kyubi obeyed without question as she lifted one hand off of Naruto's strong yet slender shoulder and brushed her hair back. Afterwards she returned to resting her head on his back. They had arrived at Tsunade's grand domain within less than 20 minutes of time as Naruto gently let Kyubi slide off his back, yet every time their flesh touched each other's, both of them would immediately become flustered beyond belief. Sorry about that, Kyubi-chan. Unbeknownst to Naruto, he had just used chan accompanied at the end of her lyrical name that strung together so perfectly. Kyubi, however, caught her Naruto's supposed mistake as she realized that maybe Naruto did have immense feelings for her after all. That maybe, just maybe, she was right in her assumption. She truly loved her Naruto and it would break her heart if her assumption was incorrect. Naruto had taken out an extra key given to him by Tsunade the day he moved into her house upon his adoption. He slid the key slowly through the slot in the door as he gently turned his wrist, opening the door to reveal a gigantic dome. Taking one glance at the superstructure, anyone would be able to tell that it was for the rich. A roof plastered with creamy white spotless coating of an extravagant paint, grand hallways, and spacious rooms. All of these were very intricately designed for the utmost pleasure. Come with me, Kyubi-chan. Naruto signaled for Kyubi, who immediately wrapped an arm around his. Naruto led Kyubi through the entrance, and upon Kyubi's amazement she noticed that the whole house was absolutely spotless. Gigantic rooms with equally gigantic doors adorned the walls of the house. Upon further inspection, Kyubi found that it was 4 stories, the biggest one in the entire Konoha village. She was to say the least very impressed that her Naruto could snag himself such a grand house, no, such a grand palace to be exact. How do you like it, Kyubi-chan? Naruto inquired at the awe-stricken Kyubi. I'm amazed, Naruto-kun. Kyubi answered, all the while still admiring the towering house that stared her in the face. Anyway, Kyubi-chan, I'll show you to my room, afterwards we can talk in private there. Naruto led Kyubi up the never-ending staircases while grasping hard on her hand, managing yet again to send Kyubi to a utopia. When they entered Naruto's room, which wasn't anything special except for the fact that it was by far the largest room in the house and filled with ninja scrolls presumably for ninjutsu purposes. I can see you train hard, Naruto-kun, that's just what I would expect from you. Kyubi said while she slowly and regretfully let her Naruto-kun go as she attempted to examine the numerous scrolls lying on the desks. Yes, I do train a lot to fill up my spare time. Regardless, I have something to give you. Naruto walked to his closet and took out a velvety soft snowy white silk top that just so happens to be all see-through. Not serving its purpose of covering up Kyubi's rather sizable cleavage, but it would have to do since that was all Naruto had at the moment. He then proceeded to take out 4 more strands of silk of the same material. This was also part of his present for Kyubi-chan. Finally he took out a pink strand of silk as he closed his closet. Come here, Kyubi, Naruto said as he indicated for the Kyubi to sit on his lap while he put his presents to good use. Kyubi, knowing what her Naruto-kun was thinking, was only too happy to oblige in the invitation. It meant that she could be closer to her Naruto-kun. Taking a seat on Naruto's lap, She leaned back into his chest while Naruto maneuvered his hands softly over her, attempting to slip the silk top over her. Once that was finished, Naruto moved to take Kyuubi's right arm. Kyuubi was totally in her own little piece of Naruto heaven as she tried to suppress her overwhelming urge to both moan and release her now overflowing juices onto the floor. She was with her true love right now, and nothing could give her the sense of security and comfort that her Naruto could give her. Naruto tied the 4 strands of silk onto Kyuubi's wrists and ankles respectively, and finally taking the soft pink strand of silk he tied it onto her right thigh. "They're all done, stand and let me see what you look like," Naruto whispered softly into Kyuubi's ear as he signaled for her to stand. She was a bit reluctant to leave her comfy seat, but did as she was told. Timidly tiptoeing to the middle of the room, she gave a little twirl of her body. If it was humanly possible, Naruto's Kyuubi was even more beautiful than she was when she first appeared. The silky white strands upon her ankles and wrists matched her top perfectly, giving her an angelic evening glow. While the pink strand of silk on her right thigh made her look even more seductive than she already did. Naruto was truly lucky, and yet he didn't know it. Kyuubi only had eyes for him and him only. "You look absolutely gorgeous," Naruto couldn't help but compliment her. This made Kyuubi blush deeply as she immediately went back to sitting on Naruto's lap as if afraid to separate with him. "Thank you so much for the present, Naruto-kun." Kyuubi, who was now totally flustered, couldn't comprehend how much love she felt for her man. Suffice to say, she has never experienced what love was like before. "Kyuubi, why don't we go and have some fun? I have the day off today," Naruto whispered softly into her ear, exuding a warm breath that made her quiver in pleasure. "Sure thing, Naruto, anything you want." Kyuubi couldn't disobey him right now, she neither wanted to nor needed to. She knew from the way Naruto has been treating her that he indeed did hold immense love for her in his heart, and just like her he yearned to be with her. His one and only, likewise Naruto was Kyuubi's one and only. They both needed each other to survive and no one else. Kyuubi no longer had any doubts in her mind concerning where her Naruto's heart belonged to. She had originally felt that Naruto would like someone else more than her even after all that she did for him, but now she knew better. This only strengthened her desire to be with him and love him with all her heart and soul. "Kyuubi, you alright?" Naruto looked at her with a worried expression on his face. "Oh, sorry, Naruto-kun, I guess I dazed out for a second there." Kyuubi replied, assuring him that she was fine. "Okay. Anyway, if we're going, I suggest that we make haste. Tsunade-sama will be back soon, and I usually don't come home until 5 in the evening. It would be suspicious and awkward for me to be back so soon," Naruto explained while he tightened his grip on Kyuubi's slim waist. "Sure thing, let's go." Kyuubi attempted to get up when she was pulled down. "Wait, one more thing. Tsunade still doesn't know about you yet, so for the time being you'll have to sleep in my room. If you want, I could give you my bed." Naruto was a gentleman. He would always offer his comfort for someone's sake. "Oh, sure, I'd love to stay in your room, but if you don't mind, I get kind of scared if I'm away from you for too long." Kyuubi knew just what she needed and wanted. "Nice try, Kyuubi-chan, but you'll have to sleep without me by your side for a couple of weeks, at least until I can be sure that Tsunade-sama doesn't find out." "Fine, Naruto-kun, but just make sure that every night you come and say good night to me, okay?" Kyuubi asked as childishly as she could. "Deal," Naruto answered as he enveloped Kyuubi into an embrace. "Anyway, Kyuubi, before we go out, you'll have to conceal your tail and ears. That's if you know how." Naruto now had a more serious look on his usually bright face. "Of course I know how, give me some credit, baby." Kyuubi easily retracted her ears as well as her tail with the use of some of her red chakra. Naruto couldn't help but laugh at the "baby" comment. He still couldn't wrap his head around how fond he had grown of his Kyuubi or the fact that Kyuubi fell for him, but all in all he was extremely glad that they found each other. They would never be seen alone from one another ever again. Heading down the stairs, Naruto retrieved a pair of creamy white slippers. "Hey Kyuubi-chan, try these on. They're really comfortable." Offering the footwear, Kyuubi took it without a second's thought. Like this, Naruto-kun, putting it on, she had instantly become more attractive. In combination with her painted toenails, the slippers really accented her feet's beauty. It was simple yet effective. "Outside. Where do you want to go, Kyusai?" Naruto quizzically asked while he intertwined his fingers with that of hers. Anywhere is fine, but one thing, is it okay if I rest my head on your shoulder while we walk? Kyuubi's voice had a hint of hope contained within the deep corridors of inner meaning. Sure. Go ahead. Naruto then offered his shoulder, which Kyuubi graciously accepted. Thus, the almost eternal lovers started down the road that laid before them. At the sweets shop, upon entering, Naruto went to the counter and picked out 2 lollipops, figuratively one for him and one for his Kyuubi-chan. He paid the price and bided his farewell to the cashier as he left with Kyuubi clinging onto him. Here you go, Kyusai. Naruto then offered a lollipop to Kyuubi while he attempted to unwrap his lollipop. Kyuubi, taking the lollipop and thanking him for buying it for her, put it slowly and sensually into her mouth. She really knew how to turn her Naruto-kun on. Slowly she circled it around the edges of her lips and licked the tip of it, smothering it with her saliva, before finally taking it fully into her mouth. Just as Naruto was about to put his in his mouth, Kyuubi snatched it away from him and threw it away. Without even apologizing, she brought her mouth into contact with Naruto's as she gently slipped her lollipop into his mouth. Naruto's eyes opened immediately at the sudden amount of pleasure he was feeling, from the sweetness of the candy to the heavenly probing of Kyuubi's tongue in his mouth. He found it impossible to deny Kyuubi what she wanted. It wasn't about the lollipop anymore, it was about the expression of her love towards him, and so easing completely he embraced her as they continued to share the sensual sensation that was their lollipop, completely oblivious to their surroundings. They had both just discovered a new level of relationships now, albeit still not at the lover's level, it had grown considerably. They would just need a little bit more time together before they would become eternal lovers. For now, however, they just remained in each other's embrace, trying their best to satisfy their hunger for each other. Unbeknownst to neither Naruto nor Kyuubi, someone had caught sight of their affair. Marriage. They stood there desperately embracing one another, laying passionate kisses that lingered on the other's lips. Both participants in this intimate event wouldn't delay in their actions. One of Naruto's hands moved timidly up towards Kyuubi's hair. Reaching its destination, it immediately began to caress the silk-like substance. Taking in her scent, Naruto only managed to fall deeper into his desire to marry her. Likewise, the Kyuubi was also experiencing a piece of heaven. Her fingers traced Naruto's hard, firm muscles while she continued to kiss her Naruto-kun. Naruto's other hand gently found its next destination, the Kyuubi's behind. Realizing that he hit his mark, Naruto's hand unconsciously gave Kyuubi's a gentle squeeze, managing to bring forth a small moan of pleasure from his Kyuubi-chan. I didn't realize that you wanted me so much, Naruto-kun. Kyuubi had a difficult time articulating her speech due to the sensations that were flowing through her body at this moment. Nevertheless, she was extremely joyful from the realization that her Naruto-kun loved and treasured her above all else. Naruto-kun, it would be best if we found some other place to continue our act of intimacy. After all, I wouldn't want anyone to see us out in the open like this. Kyuubi reluctantly pulled away from her Naruto's warm embrace as she stared into his oceanic jewels, only managing to lose herself even further in those intense hot eyes. Yes, that would be the best course of action right now. Engaging in indecent acts in a public vacancy is not desirable. With that, Naruto released Kyuubi from his grasp as he too stared at her ruby orbs that burned so feverishly. Naruto couldn't comprehend where their relationship level stood at this moment. Was it a brother and sister kind of love? It was definitely not a servant and master relationship. He also couldn't call it a lover relationship in his own fear of being rejected by her. Naruto-kun, what's on your mind? Kyuubi had gazed worriedly at her soon-to-be lover, and she couldn't help but inquire that of him, seeing his expression change from one of lustful enjoyment to that of uncertainty. Kyuubi embraced her Naruto-kun and laid her head on his chest in an attempt to reassure him that everything was going to be okay. Feeling the pressure on his chest, Naruto instinctively cradled his Kyuubi-chan's head within his hands, caressing her soft silky hair while taking in her scent, which smelled so sweet. Naruto's embrace tightened around his Kyuubi-chan as he was afraid to let her slip away from him. Naruto-kun, I can feel your pain, my Naruto-sama, please let me assist you. Kyuubi was also getting upset that her Naruto-kun was in anguish. The bottled-up emotions of love for her was really taking effect on him. You can tell me anything that's on your mind. I wish to be one with you in spirit. Kyuubi's warm breath exuded a sense of comfort into Naruto's skin as she continued to whisper words of encouragement to her Naruto-kun. She hoped that he would ask her the one fated question in which she had been waiting for ever since she came out. Kyuubi-chan, I want to mar. Naruto gave up at the last second. He released his Kyuubi completely, taking off in the opposite direction and never gazing back. He was in pain right now. He had finally found his one true love and yet he lacks the guts to express his feelings of desire for her. She must be crying right now. She wanted to marry him ever since she came out, yet her one true love in which she loves with no bounds lacks what she loved him for, his courage and determination to triumph over all obstacles, and of course for his cuteness and looks. Naruto-kun, why won't you have the courage to ask me? Kyuubi asked in anguish as she sobbed. She would definitely find a way for her Naruto-kun to confess to her, one way or another. She took off after him in a desperate attempt to catch his fleeing essence within her grasp. Spying on the spectacle taking place, a figure stepped out from the intimidating shadows. She had lavender hair and misty pearls, she wore fish netting that covered the majority of her body and had a long skin-colored overcoat as well as leg pads that aided her while on a mission. Smirking at the emotional event that had taken place, she whispered to herself in a barely protruding tone. Seems like I have some competition if I want to make Naruto-kun my. The figure smirked once again as she coated her lips in heavy saliva, thrilled by the prospect of an engaging hunt. Naruto was hurting so badly on the inside, it felt like gravity was pushing down upon him in an attempt to slow him enough so that Kyuubi could catch him. He was a fool. Why did he run away from the one person he treasured above all else? Why did he lack his usual upbeat spirit that his friends and family loved about him? The answer was simple, he was afraid of his lover rejecting his proposal. So all he did was run as gleaming droplets of salty moisture flowed freely from the edges of his eyes. Kyuubi-chan, please forgive me, I don't deserve you. Naruto had to run as far away from her as possible. He couldn't bear with witnessing the hurtful expression that was probably adorned upon the face of his one and only. My Naruto-sama, why are you such a fool when it comes to the aspect of eternal bliss? I have waited so long to be your wife, I wouldn't dream of saying no. Kyuubi's tears also flowed freely as she continued to chase after her desired man in hopes of catching him in time. She was stopped, however, when a female ninja interjected her pursuit. I have seen you with Naruto-kun, you should seriously stop this futile attempt. He would never be with you. Anko, who had been trying to snag Naruto for herself, had to make sure that she eliminated all her competition. Kyuubi was getting desperate. If she didn't make haste, then her only desire would be ripped from her loving hold. She had to get to her Naruto-kun soon or else it would be too late. Kyuubi was in no mood to play games. I don't know who you think you are, but a whore like you who only wants to have intercourse with him could never truly love him like I do. You like him for his looks, but I treasure him for much more. To me he is the person that gives me a purpose, to me he is priceless. You can try to flatter him with your less than desirable body, but that will never work. Kyuubi converged her anguish into burning determination for her Naruto-kun, lamenting red chakra seeped out from her body. Her eyes seemed to exude burning hatred for the person that dared to stand in front of her. Her furry tail flared into existence, accompanied by her two foxy ears. Her fur stood on edge as the purple markings deepened in color. She was going to show this girl just how serious she was. You better get out of my way, little girl. I'm not in the mood for any disturbances today. Kyuubi's claws expanded in length as she prepared to savagely rip her opponent apart. Her creamy white legs managed to look even after her transformation. Her snow-white slippers, the ones that you have access to in Japanese hotels, seemed to complement her feet even more. Kyuubi's hair also grew in length, managing to reach down past her ankles. What is this eerie chakra? This is too much for me. If she chooses to engage in combat, I will not be able to defend myself. Anko appeared shaken by the sheer amount of chakra released as she shakily drew a kunai from her pouch. Sweat accumulated on her forehead as she cursed under her breath. Get out of my way. I will be with my Naruto whether you like it or not. Kyuubi dashed towards her target, claws outstretched, while still managing to maintain her graceful beauty that surpassed all others. Crap. This isn't good. Anko could only defend herself from the advancing assault as she had no other way to counterattack. That's my Kyuubi-chan's chakra. What is she doing? Naruto appeared panicky as he immediately stopped his childish game of tag and headed towards the opposite direction. I only hope that I make it in time. Naruto's endurance had been greatly cut after Kyuubi had appeared before him. The only possible way for him to retain his energy was if he held on tight to his Kyuubi. On his own, he lacked that ability, and certainly it was beginning to show as vast amounts of sweat accumulated on his forehead. Please let me make it in time. The hellish battle commenced. Anko twirled her kunai in one hand and took a swift swipe at Kyuubi, only for it to be dodged. Kyuubi ducked her head under the imposing strike and took a sweep of the leg. Managing to knock Anko off balance, Kyuubi's claws gripped her neck, squeezing the life out of her. The purple slowly spread into her system. Internal bleeding was taking place, and yet Anko was still stubborn enough to have one last trick up her sleeve. Using her remaining strength, Anko's legs were quickly brought up into a headlock. With the added pressure on Kyuubi's neck, she released Anko from her clutch. Kyuubi's hair draped over Anko's blemish-free thighs, managing to give her a taste of her silky hair. Anko tried to restrain herself from having a blush at the comfortable feeling she was having while sitting on Kyuubi's shoulders. Kyuubi felt disgusting. This girl's flesh was so unappealing to that of her Naruto's soft embrace, like that of an angel's caress. Desperately, she took a bite of Anko's thighs in an attempt to induce pain to Anko, hoping it was enough to throw her off her shoulders. Feeling the searing pain of fangs sinking into her flesh as well as her own blood tickle down her thighs, Anko had to let go. She felt her chakra being overpowered by Kyuubi. Needing to get away quick, Anko used her opponent's shoulder as a springboard. This was indeed one cat fight. Spitting the crude taste out of her mouth in the form of saliva, Kyuubi attempted to end this. You taste disgusting. You actually mounted me. With that, Kyuubi's chakra flared into existence as she concentrated the majority of it into one final strike. Her claws turned from a creamy white to that of a bloody crimson. This will end it. I have no time to linger with you. Kyuubi's force was accented by the crackling of the earth underneath her. Her tail swayed in the crisp clean air as she prepared to give this intruder a taste of pain. On a more positive note, this cat fight was taking place in a secluded area in Konoha, so no more mortals will witness the demon in action. This effectively cut down the chance of Kyuubi being found out. As long as she took care of Anko, all will return to normal. You're a demon. Anko spat as she also tightened her grip on her kunai, attempting to end this with one final strike. So you have finally realized that, have you? Now you see that there is absolutely no way for you to win. Kyuubi smirked as she signaled the start of combat by springing her legs into a repetitive motion, managing to carry her to her destination. Likewise, Anko, despite her own fear, also charged at Kyuubi. Claws and kunai established contact with flesh. However, it wasn't the desired flesh that had been struck. Realization dawned upon both Kyuubi and Anko that what they planned to hit wasn't harmed. Instead, the subject of their affection was now bleeding out towards them. Naruto had just managed to reach the scene of combat in the nick of time, and without thinking he jumped down and embraced Kyuubi, protecting her from the kunai. Naruto's flesh was totally ripped apart by the sheer force of both his beloved Kyuubi-chan's chakra-enhanced claw and the piercing pain of the thrusting kunai. Blood spurted out of the massive wound. Naruto couldn't hold in the pain anymore as he released a mouthful of blood that he had been trying desperately to hold in. Reminiscent droplets of red coated Kyuubi as she stood there still stunned by the realization that the one she loved had been hurt by her own deathly claws. Likewise, Anko was also speechless. She hadn't expected that Naruto would jump in front of the assault. The fragile dam that stored all of a female's emotions was breaking. Kyuubi sobbed so hard into her Naruto-kun's chest, licking the wounds that she had caused in hopes of healing them. She buried her head into his loving embrace, crying even harder into his chest. I know I hurt you, but please don't leave me. I want to be with you. Kyuubi-chan, I don't care what anyone else thinks. The fact of the matter is I love you more than anything. I know that I may have caused you so much pain by running away, but now I'll never run ever again. I love you and will continue to love you as long as I live. With that, Naruto dropped down on one knee. Despite his own searing pain, he continued on. Kyuubi-chan, will you marry me? Naruto bit down on his pain as he retrieved a small jewelry box, decorated with silver linen. He opened it shakily, and inside was the most beautiful ring Kyuubi had ever laid her waiting eyes on. It was a mixture of both rubies and diamonds arranged together into the shape of a rose. Kyubi hadn't waited to think about the reply that she would give him and just totally freed herself of the emotional burden and jumped into her Naruto-kun's arms, embracing him hard, licking his wounds while she kissed him. Kyubi extended her finger so that Naruto could decorate it with the ring, Naruto obliging with her slid the ring onto her finger. Naruto-kun, you don't know how long I have waited for you to ask me that question. I love to. Kyubi's tail wrapped itself around Naruto's waist to keep him balanced as she laid kiss after kiss over his blood-stained skin. Naruto was desperately trying to hold on, but the blood loss was too great of a physical burden for him as he passed out from the world of the living due to exhaustion. The last thing he remembered was how foolish he had been to not confess to his lover sooner, instead of going through all this. Kyubi, feeling her husband slip away, had a worried expression, but after further observation she smirked as she realized that he just passed out from the amount of strain induced upon his body. So she just held him in her embrace, brushing his long blonde hair that had the irresistible essence to her. She continued to apply her loving tongue on his wounds, making sure that each time she licked him she would also give him a kiss. This intimate moment between husband and wife was interrupted, however, as a kunai came flying towards them in an attempt to sever their unbreakable connection to each other. Realizing that she still had to be taken care of, Kyubi slowly let her husband's head rest upon the ground. Kyubi gently stood as she caught the kunai with her tail. You just don't want to accept the reality of things, do you? Kyubi slowly advanced upon the weakened ninja as she brought out a hand to caress the sweat-stained face. I will make sure that you never bother me or my husband ever again. With that, her creamy white nails extended in length as she tickled Anko's chin. I will make sure that you forget all about this day, it will be like this day never existed as part of your life. Kyubi breathed a flowery essence into Anko's face, immediately making Anko lightheaded. A few moments later, Anko's consciousness was taken away from her. When you wake up, you will continue to live your life as if nothing happened. With that, Kyubi went back to cuddling with her husband while she carried him back to his house. This is of course after she reverted back to her human form. She wouldn't want to cause her husband any more trouble than he already had. She loved him too much for that. That night, after sneaking into Tsunade's house and then to Naruto's room undetected, Kyubi gently laid her Naruto-kun down on the soft feathered bed, while she sat beside him and cradled his head in her huge as a sign of supreme affection. She only had him in her heart, and now that they were married no one would ever dare to separate the two of them. I suppose the issue of having children can wait, for now my lovely Naruto-sama, you need to rest. With that, Kyubi pulled the covers over her and Naruto. Seconds later, a heavenly breathing could be heard from within the covers, forever mixing their essences together as both of them drifted off into a blissful state of tranquility. For both Kyubi and Naruto, this day would be forever remembered as well as valued. For both Naruto and Kyubi, life was perfect, both of them had found their perfect person. Tsunade's room. I think it's time for my son to partake in the senior Junin selection exams. Warmth like no other, a feathered substance rested patiently on his cheek. What was this sensation that ravaged his face with such soothing comfort? Too great was the alluring essence of the scent of some wild flowery fragrance, that the resulting conclusion was rather interesting. His mind couldn't resist the appealing weight that sat perched on the side of his face. It felt like an angel had graced him with her presence. He tried desperately to respond in some acceptable manner, but later found that such a simple task was quite difficult to realize. He struggled vigorously with the burden that was his physical wounds. It was breathtakingly laborious for him. His whole body felt increasingly frigid. The blankets heaved upon his broken physique did little to generate some reliable source of heat. Perhaps this was the lingering effects of the gruesome chest wound he had acquired yesterday. One thing was for certain, this entire ordeal was definitely stressful for him. Regardless, Naruto had to regain his conscience. He had to give thanks to the person who had so graciously taken him in and treated him with hospitality. Struggling against his heavy eyelids that refused to cooperate, Naruto barely established contact with the world that was, only moments ago, so far away from him. Realization had dawned upon him the moment he opened his eyes. Their eyes locked with each other. A crimson mixture of depth and beauty matched so perfectly with the mysterious sparkling sapphire. They were indeed a perfect pair for one another. The blissful moment could not last, however. Kyubi was just too worried about him to let any trivial distractions keep her from her true motive. Her angelic voice rang through the air, leaving behind it a trail of nostalgic desires. I'm so glad you're awake now. Genuine worry was evident in her facial features. Those pleading eyes held within them the vast oceans of her undying love. It was only too blatant. Naruto couldn't help but feel proud of his Kyuubi-chan. To be so transfixed and resolved in loving him, that was a sort of dedication that belonged solely to his Kyuubi. No one else could ever hope to possess it. Naruto had to reply, he couldn't keep Kyuubi in that panicky state. That would be inhuman. Naruto just had to give her reassurance that he was fine. He tried to maneuver his lips in a certain fashion that would convey his message to her. Slowly, through heavy, laborious breaths, Naruto articulated his rational massage. Don't worry about me, Kyuubi-chan, I'm fine thanks to you. Naruto knew what to do next. This would drive his point home for sure. Carefully, Naruto withdrew his concealed arm from under the coverings as he gently cupped Kyuubi's cheek. Naruto utilized his other arm as he pulled slightly upon Kyuubi, drawing her in his embrace. The tension that was at first realized quickly dissipated as Kyuubi established herself comfortably within her husband's divine protection. Naruto caressed her hair at a moderate speed. The intervals between his breaths tickled Kyuubi's flesh as she wiggled further into the deeper regions that still lay uninhabited. Her own arms encircled her husband's neck as she pulled him closer to her incredible mounds. Kyuubi couldn't resist kissing her Naruto-kun over and over again. This was her way of an apologetic approach. Well, not exactly, she would have kissed him feverishly even if he wasn't hurt. Now that Kyuubi had Naruto-kun, she wasn't even going to consider leaving him. She would never again pride herself on her supposed title of queen. To her, the title was but a shallow facade that shielded her until now. She had no need for such childish acknowledgments. All that she lived for now was her Naruto-kun. That was, after all, the reason she escaped from her imprisonment. Kyuubi still had to make sure that Naruto was alright, she was just too worried to put any events from the previous night to rest. She needed to make for certain that Naruto was indeed unhindered by that atrocious wound that was inflicted upon his masculine chest. As if afraid, Kyuubi let but a meager trace of her emotion slip out in the form of a brief sob. She quickly recollected her composure as she spoke. Yet again in that angelic voice that Naruto loved so much. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry, please find it in your heart to forgive me. I don't want. Kyuubi paused as tears welled up along the brim of her eyes. I don't want you to ever despise me. Kyuubi wouldn't cry. This was but a minuscule occurrence, she had an image to uphold. She couldn't just expose her weak side. Yet still, she managed to sob openly. This was indeed how much love Kyuubi held for her husband. Able to let herself cry openly into his arms without a second thought. She didn't want to seem weak, not by a long shot. This was Naruto, the one she loved boundlessly. To her, Kyuubi could show everything to Naruto. Her emotions were not excluded. Noticing her unease, Naruto immediately took the initiative to comfort his wife. He hated witnessing an emotionally broken female in front of him, especially if the female in question happens to be his own wife. This would definitely not do. Kyuubi-chan, I give you my word that I'll always love and cherish you. So you don't have to worry anymore, okay? All I need is some rest. Naruto tried to sound like a tough guy, unfazed by pitiful emotions, but in the end he resumed his original demeanor. Noticing that the liquid had ceased to flow, Naruto continued on. He didn't say a single word, instead he just held onto Kyuubi as she snuggled against his chest. Kyuubi instantly calmed, she gave a nod of confirmation as she delved deeper into her husband's encirclement. On the receiving end of the message, Naruto could only smile. All he could do was continue holding her. She was still rigged with guilt at the incident that occurred yesterday. If only there was some way to reassure her without sounding like some poor excuse for a pun of some sort. Exhaustion was taking him again. Why was this happening? Why was he so weak? Naruto was in turmoil, desperately combating to stay but a moment longer in the land of the waking, yet somehow he just wanted to give in to the enticing offer that sleep offered to him. If a person was extremely observant, she could have picked at the expression of hidden anguish expressed mildly in those eyes of his. Just like that, Naruto held onto Kyuubi, as if for an alternate source of strength. A cooling breeze bathed the couple, tranquility washed over the room. It was a piece of heaven for both of them. Though, somehow it mattered not. As long as they could stay like this, any price that they had to pay would be acceptable. They were about to be richly compensated with a never-ending life together. Yet, it wouldn't be without hardships and pains. They were going to stay with each other. No question could be posed to their reality. Nothing would be able to drive them apart, all except one. Somewhere unknown, seated agitatedly on his throne, a male of moderate age, appearing somewhere in his 30s. He was basked in the presence of the most gorgeous-looking servants that had no comparison. Totally unparalleled, though the scenery was somewhat impeded by the unbearable stench that emanated from the surroundings. The male in question had vibrant, acceptable lengthened hair, crimson in color. His physical proportion was quite impressive. In relation to someone very familiar, he sported 2 large purple gashes across his muscular stomach, and though concealed from view, he also possessed 2 gashes of purple across his thighs. Perhaps it was by mere coincidence, but whoever this person was, he bared a striking resemblance to Kyubi. Though, certainly his arrogance was foreign to his expected behavior. How dare she reject me? I ranked number 1 as the most desirable husband in the entire demon realm, rated by none other than her own parents. Ever since she was sealed inside that, the male paused for a brief moment before he seemingly found the correct words. Idiotic flesh bag, she's been mesmerized with him. There is no way anyone could be hotter than me. That I can guarantee. Yet, why did she refuse to come back to the demon realm when I contacted her? She must already know of her father and mother's wishes to wed her to me. The male was in a quandary. Sparking a sort of grim determination, the male articulated his thoughts to no one in particular. I will bring you back and then marry you. This is both my and your parents' wish. I, the absolute irresistible demon, stand here today proudly to proclaim that you will be my. He was indeed a strange one. After his long-winded self-proclamation, he sprouted into an anime-style laughing fit with only the slightest hint of stupidity. Soon after finishing his preparations, the still nameless male set off to the human world. His target, Uzumaki Naruto. Much to Naruto's insistence on taking care of himself, Kyubi wouldn't hear any of it. She was going to assume the role of wife nurse today. To her, taking care of her defenseless cute husband was a pleasure she reserved for herself. Now, Naruto-sama, you know that as the nurse assigned to you, I cannot allow you to do anything rash while incapacitated. Although Kyubi lacked proper nurse attire, she did happen to have an extremely cute nurse head accessory. Not like that mattered anyway, since Kyubi made even the simplest of fashion appear with unequaled flair and appeal. Her see-through silk top did nothing to conceal her bodily goods. This made Naruto very comfortable. As a man, he couldn't help but love every second of it. Being treated by your own wife, who was willing to dress up as a nurse and not only that, but assume the part, was amazing to him. Good thing his mother wasn't here to witness this. He would undoubtedly be in for hell if she had known about this. Though, Naruto had his doubts. Tsunade had already been trying to marry him off for quite some time now. As to her position on this matter of being married prior to her knowledge, Naruto could only hope for the best. Just like that, Naruto obliged with Kyubi's little role-playing game. So giving into his erotic fantasies, Naruto assumed the part of an obedient patient. Conversing and cooperating with Kyubi were 2 of the many things that Naruto wanted to do with his wife nurse. He later reconsidered. Naruto and Kyubi had eternal life after all. It definitely wasn't beneficial to spend a never-ending existence inhabiting the same house with an emotionally provocative demon female. As they say, a moment's fulfillment is often not worth the troubles later on. Tsunade's office. A groan of absolute agony echoed throughout the grand halls that provided passageways for all the various ninja that had business within the tower. Reality for these average people were harsh. Even for the female of the highest standing in the entirety of Konoha, life was harsh. As much as Tsunade attempted to rid herself of the emotionally straining papers that piled in hordes on her desk, she could not neglect her assigned duty as the 5th Hokage. Her usual beauty was not present today. The blondness of her hair seemed somewhat empty. It didn't do justice for her overall appearance. Hollowness was also blatantly present. As much as Tsunade established herself, she couldn't deny her burning desire to take on the role of the wanderer that she was known for. Those memories were priceless to her. The unhindered freedom, she would always cherish that. It was to no avail. Ever since she took on the job as the Hokage, it was always, meeting this, or, sign here Tsunade-sama. At first it was bearable, but as the cycle of time continued on, she could no longer deny the reality of things. She could no longer do whatever she desired. Instead, she was restricted to rules and regulations. The resulting effects were nothing short to devastating. Nostalgia was definitely an understatement. Tsunade hasn't been able to notice the ever-present changes that took place. Somehow, her genjutsu could only provide a dwindling image of a beautiful girl. On the inside, she was aging. The stress had accumulated in the form of increasing wrinkles, rigidness, and most of all, the thinness in her offsetting attitude. Unpleasant mood often results in full-blown arguments over even the most insignificant events. It was truly a massive undertaking unfit for one such as Tsunade. Her personality runs counter to the requirements of being a leader. Though, it could have also been due to the unwilling obligation of returning to Konoha that resulted in the eventual emotional shift. The growing hostilities that her former teammate turned traitor Orochimaru exhibited were still a very bitterly refreshing reoccurrence in her daily thoughts. Seemingly unable to forget about the moment when he cut ties with everyone that he once felt dear. Now, although Tsunade did not have any personal intimacy for Orochimaru, it was still rather difficult for her to accept the fate that had been handed to their team. After training together for all those years, it hit her quite hard. It left a sort of raw indentation, forever to plague the bearer. Forcibly elevating herself from depression, Tsunade attempted to stay focused. She had a lot to accomplish today. It hurt so badly on the inside, being condemned to an office. She was unable to see her son, she couldn't embrace him. Tsunade desired nothing but a life of blissful tranquility with her child, yet such a simple task seemed staggeringly unaccomplished. She could only endure the pain for now. Some random street in Konoha. The mail had finally arrived in the human world, a bit rigged from having to travel such a long distance but still in one piece. Where are you, my beloved? He had no common sense. He was positioned in a busy street with many bystanders eyeing him already due to his atrocious choice of clothing, yet he draws even more attention to himself by saying something that intimate out in the open. In short, he was an idiot. Still not noticing the weird facial expressions he was receiving. The male continued his call of love. Laughter soon erupted out in the streets as more people were drawn by the commotion. This later became a never-ending cycle. As more people witnessed his foolish cries, more people were drawn to it. Whispers rang throughout the gathering. Things like, "What's with this guy?" and, "Mommy, I'm scared," were nothing short of common. Still, the laughter oppressed all other conversation. Suddenly the male stopped. With added agitation he fidgeted. I can't believe I was being watched. For all his witty intellect and demonic superiority, this guy wasn't very bright. He beckoned incessantly for Kyuubi, all the while being completely unaware of his surroundings. He was hopeless. The citizens of Konoha, upon hearing that he had no prior knowledge of being observed, could only laugh harder. This infuriated the male. Inferiors such as you dare to laugh at me? Quote. The way he spoke, added with the corny sentence, was really an open invitation for more laughter. Perhaps this male wasn't so piping hot after all. No matter, my Kyuubi Heim will surely be able to detect my unrivaled power. What he didn't realize was that his ability as a demon left a lot to be desired. Kyuubi wouldn't be able to sense him even if she intended on doing so. His inability as an all-powerful being left others of the same race nothing less than disgraced. His occupation as a gatekeeper was really only given to him as a charitable favor owed. As for the servants, well, let's just say he nagged Kyuubi's father to the breaking point. Though, the one still unanswered question would remain a mystery for a little longer. Certainly at first glance the guy wouldn't qualify for the honor of marrying Kyuubi, not even for the next 10 millennia. Though, the reasons why Kyuubi's father allowed him to take his daughter's hand in marriage were still enveloped in a thick fog. Regardless, smirking, he proceeded to search. Leaving people dying of laughter was the only sign of any sort of recognition that he would ever receive. Naruto's room. How's my lovely patient? There was a hint of lustful seductiveness conveyed in that message, Naruto was sure of it. Though, the realization that Kyuubi loved to witness him defenseless was turning him on quite a bit. Naruto knew that Kyuubi would get really hot and horny whenever she was with him, which was always. That was already a proven fact, but with his movements restricted like this he couldn't really do anything if she decided to attempt something. Though, it wasn't like he would have taken offense. To him Kyuubi was everything. To him Kyuubi was the most beautiful of all living creatures, truthfully she was. She was the undisputed beauty of this world. Though, right now his thoughts would come to an abrupt end of sorts. Kyuubi sensually maneuvered her body over his as she established herself firmly on his muscular chest. Pinning both of his arms to the bed, she smirked. Certainly this was unnerving. Naruto had never witnessed this side of Kyuubi before, so dominant, so commanding. Yet, despite her new mood of sorts, Naruto could still identify her boundless love for him. He could only hope that she would go gently. Ever since yesterday evening, Kyuubi no longer retracted her tail or ears. It was a hassle for her to utilize chakra for something as meaningless as her demonic appearance. She was certain that Naruto loved her for who she was, not what she looked like. That is the essence of true love, to be able to accept your respective other without stressing over the insignificant details. Kyuubi-chan, I don't think I can provide you with your desired pleasure. Well, at least for the duration of my injuries. There was grim sarcasm in that sentence. Naruto was about to continue when he was effectively silenced by Kyuubi's tail. It perched laxly, managing to conceal Naruto's mouth effectively. Shish, it's okay Naruto-kun, you don't have to satisfy me in your condition. I'm yours now, you can pleasure me for an eternity once you rejuvenate your wounded body. For now, let your wife pleasure you. She gently placed her finger on his lips. Her pearly long nails tickled his flesh somewhat. Naruto had to brace himself for some blood. After all, Kyuubi-chan did have very intimidating nails. They could excavate blood at even the slightest of dabbles. It was surprising, feeling Kyuubi's nails caress his face so tenderly, yet there was no blood. Naruto re-established himself as he leveled his eyesight with his Kyuubi-chan's. They held so much love for him that it was only natural she would feel the need to ventilate her emotions. After all, to have that much love for one person, constantly bottled up inside you would do that to anyone. Being a demon that craved for erotic contact with her significant other only strengthened this desire. You don't have to fear my nails Naruto-kun, they wouldn't inflict a wound upon you. Kyuubi giggled at the expression that her husband showcased. Kyuubi had no intention of making Naruto terrified of her, actually quite the opposite. Kyuubi had to admit though, it was still rather amusingly adorable to witness him in that state. Naruto-kun, my index finger is somewhat sore, mind enveloping it in your mouth for me? There was definitely a double meaning conveyed in her seductive message. Naruto was absolutely positive of that, though he had no strength to raise a debate over it. Kyuubi desperately desired to feel as close with her husband as humanly possible. She had so many emotions bottled up within her that she needed to express it. Otherwise, her often sadistic and not to mention violent love for her Naruto-kun mood swings would start to take effect, that would definitely be entirely undesirable. Certainly when she needed pleasure her first and only choice would be to engage in erotic teasing of sorts with her only partner, Naruto. Without waiting for any kind of confirmation, Kyuubi parted Naruto-kun's lips sensually. She lowered her delicate frame so that it encompassed his as she kissed him, letting the velvet flesh intertwine with one another, losing herself completely in the sweet taste. Despite what many people seem to value as a fact, Kyuubi was absolutely repulsed by forcible, fast-paced fulfillments. Instead, she loved a slow to moderate pace when love-making. Her maiden head, if you will, would not allow any shaft sizes that differentiated from Naruto's the honor of entrance into her interior flavors. In short, it was her absolute defense against being pregnant with any undesirable newborns. Remaining a virgin until the day Naruto summoned enough courage to grace her with their first child was of the absolute highest priority to her. She wanted nothing to do with anything one thing else except her Naruto-kun. She was indeed addicted to him in every way. Likewise, Naruto was with her. They were the perfect match for each other. Unlike other couples who usually indulged in their lives only once, Kyuubi and Naruto would usually have encounters at least 3 times a day. To both of them it was the absolute norm to express their love through intimate contact. Back with that idiot, the self-proclaimed ultimate demon was rather unintelligent. For all his remarks of superiority, inferior races and such, he couldn't even uphold his own standards. He wasn't in the least bit superior to any of the human race, he was the one that was inferior. He was lost. I seemed to have ventured into unknown territory. It was always amusing to witness him speak in a sophisticated tongue. Though, being a demon did have its rules and regulations. Having been forced to speak in the higher class tone, for the majority of his life he couldn't very well abandon it now, could he? Though, he should really learn to grasp the atmosphere sometimes. Pardon my sudden intrusion, but do any of you delinquents happen to know where a stunning demon mistress is located? He should really have picked a better descriptive term. What you calling us? Certainly their linguistic skills could use some refining. Though having to live in an underfunded district was a major cause of such a problem. As they say, you become like those you grow up with. Whether that be in a positive way or vice versa was all dependent upon the morals of the individual. Though, it would appear in this instance that it was in an extremely negative way. Having less than his share of common sense, the demon replied again. To him it was perfectly natural to call them delinquents, seeing as that was what they were. That was the way he was educated. To always be blunt. Though, that revealed it to be a very hazardous trait of his. Do you delinquents know of a demon mistress with hair crimson? He was sure that they would answer him now. He didn't like to repeat himself, but seeing as he originated from a foreign land, he would have to respect the customs of the human world. Oh, how mistaken he would later prove to be. He was smug to the unbearable limit, waiting on the receiving end of the answer. No reply in the form of words had approached his ears. Instead, a searing pain had acquainted itself with his flesh, knocking him out cold upon contact. He had just so conveniently closed his eyes. Though, one aspect was shrouded in fog. He wasn't able to sense the impending assault. It could easily have been due to the insignificant chakra emanations exuded from his attackers. After all, not every inhabitant of Konoha had a career as a ninja. That gotta teach you some respect. Smirking, he and his associates retreated to whence they came, leaving the demon for dead. Naruto's room. Kyuubi and Naruto were currently in a kissing fest. They feasted in their respective essences, managing to lose themselves yet again. Being partially, Kyuubi had relieved herself of the silk top, albeit very reluctantly. Their bodies pressed up against the other as if for support. This was their first engagement of the day. There were no forcible dominations. They both knew what the other was thinking, so it was quite conceivable for them to just click with each other. When one moved a certain way, the other would respond correctly. This again was a sure sign that both were destined to be together forever. Breathing in long soothing wisps, Kyuubi encircled Naruto's frame within her own body. She paused for a few seconds before she posed a question. Naruto-kun, do you mind if I take a bite of your neck? I promise that it will be painless. A confirmation comes in the form of a nod. It signaled the approval of Kyuubi's planned action. She steadied herself as she bit into Naruto's flesh. It was more than a mere nibble but lacked the pressure of a full-blown bite. Kyuubi was in absolute heaven. To be this intimate with her husband was a pleasure she yearned to experience for a long time. She absolutely loved it. This would definitely have to be added to their daily routines in the near future, say tomorrow. Kyuubi became more feral by the minute, her more reserved attitude being forgotten at this moment. The animalistic instincts were establishing a firm grip on her judgment. The more prolonged the bite became, the closer Kyuubi would shuffle her body towards her husband. She desired nothing but to embrace Naruto to death. Kyuubi was losing herself to the heat of this extremely intimate moment. Finally, as if having had her fill of Naruto's flesh, her lips parted from his neck. There was a raw bite mark inscribed upon the flesh. As her lips parted from his neck, a trail of silky saliva could be seen stretching from her tongue, still being attached to Naruto's neck. There was a heavy lustful blush apparent in Kyuubi's features. She needed to ventilate her emotions, tears of oppressed affection beamed to the brim of her eyes. That was my love for you, baby. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. She was breaking apart with emotions too foreign for her to distinguish. Kyuubi could no longer hold her tears. Flinging herself upon Naruto's chest, she hid her face within the warm confines of Naruto's tear-soaked shirt. I love you so much, I can't bear to witness someone taking you away from me. Just like that, Kyuubi would repeat her love for her one and only over and over again. She wouldn't and couldn't take chances now. After the events of the previous night with that fish netted, Kyuubi would have to accompany Naruto wherever he wished to go from now on. Responding in kind, Naruto encircled Kyuubi's delicate body as he laid a kiss of reassurance upon her forehead, instantly snapping her out of the breakdown. Embracing her tightly within his arms, Naruto spoke. Kyuubi-chan, you're such an idiot, don't ever think something so profoundly preposterous. I won't leave you for anything in this world. Realizing Kyuubi's embrace had tightened gave him the response he desired. Back to the unconscious demon. What was this blinding flash of white? I don't particularly remember what happened. I felt something very heavy establish contact with the back of my head and then nothing. The idiot demon was once again returning to the world of the waking, although very groggily. His vision was severely distorted. Those mortal fools, they have guts to attack a superior demon gatekeeper. That's unheard of. His own words ran counter to his supposed status. For such a superior demon, watching over a gate all day sure seems unbefitting. Then again, he didn't exactly know full well what he was talking about. The demon slowly stood, and dusted himself of the filth that had accumulated on his leather clothing. No matter, this is but a minor setback to delay the inevitable. I will find Kyuubi Heim. Afterwards, a crazed laugh sounded, for no apparent reason. Perhaps this demon really did find a lot of fancy in the whole evil mastermind that laughs whenever he did something. Movie genres. Finally calming his hysteria, the demon steadied his emotions. Soon after, the sound of clinking heels could be heard. Tsunade's office. Naruto's alcoholic mother was at it again. Tsunade's voice was the only thing that could be heard throughout the administration building, in which she busied herself constantly with paperwork. At this exact moment though, her urge of a soak in the hot springs could not be denied. Shizune, you're going with me. We're going to relax. Send for Naruto as well. I have something very important that I wish to relay to him personally. With that said, Tsunade barged through the locked door, much to the dismay of the Anbu and her assistant. There was going to have to be a new door installed. Being forcibly bound to her office for the majority of her Hokage career had left Tsunade with a burning desire to escape, which had only risen in magnitude with the passing of the seasons. There was no way she could let up an opportunity to escape her duties as Hokage, if only for a little while. This was especially the case on humid days, such as today. Having been given strange and terrified looks on her way out, made her experience a sense of accomplishment. Though in truth, it couldn't really be called an accomplishment. It was more along to lines of being fear-driven. Passing Neji on the way out, Shizune quickly signaled for his attention, briefing him about the Hokage's wishes to meet with her son, thus implying for him to retrieve Naruto. Afterwards, Shizune tailed Tsunade from closely behind. She was ever so alert, on the lookout for any signs of change that might appear. There was none, much to her disappointment. Tsunade was for the most part a straightforward female. Once her mind was set on achieving a certain goal, there would be no opposition from anyone. As a Hokage and her assistant steadily disappeared from the line of sight, only one person was left standing. Neji sighed. He felt sorry for Shizune, he truly did. He could only imagine what it would be like to spend all that effort to appease Tsunade's demands. One thing was for certain, there would be no way he could become her assistant and live to not only sustain but enjoy it. That fact alone made him shudder. For him to have to endure Tsunade's driven mood swings would definitely be too much. Right now though, he couldn't exactly effort the time to draw forth complex self-discussions. He had a job to accomplish. In Mr. and Mrs. Kyuubi's bed chamber, velvety purple draping hung to conceal the inappropriate engagement that was currently in full swing. Moans and the occasional swearing were the only evidence that gave affirmativeness to the existence of inhabitants in this eroticized surrounding. The mother and father of Naruto's beloved wife were giving each other extreme pleasure, both orally and, by other means, mainly the pleasure of enclosure. Of course, they both didn't desire to have any more children and thus had to control the amount of chakra they implemented. In short, their way of preventing childbirth is to cut off chakra to their private areas. This of course, results in loss of sensation, but it didn't really bother them. After all, they had other means to make up for it. Kyuubi's mother was a carbon copy of her daughter, the only difference between them was perhaps the level of bodily maturity. Purple stripes adorned her thighs as well as the sides her stomach. Like Kyuubi, she also had her fair share of purple eyeshadow that drove many males into a lustful wanting of sorts. The defining trait that differentiated Kyuubi's family was the overall meekness of the wives to their husbands. Now, that being said, they are extremely picky of whom they marry. Doing so will ensure that they get the cream of the crop, so to speak, of course. It's not out of the norm to witness thorough inspection of every inch of a male candidate for the privilege of marrying their child. After all, a prestigious family such as theirs has to maintain a set amount of social standing. In truth, the Kyubi family was even more well-known, based on superiority of demonic standing, than the Shikaku compound. Baby, did you send him to retrieve our daughter? Kyubi's mother attempted to stay focused during her question but found it extremely difficult to do so when she was experiencing so much erotic pleasure. She traced her index finger around the edges of her luscious lips as she slipped her other arm under her body. Her legs were comfortably established around her husband's waist. It was both a way of providing him security and more intimacy between the two of them. His response was slow and heavily burdened, perhaps due to the physical strain that would bring whenever he had erotic encounters with his wife. Which were as often if not more than the number of encounters Kyubi and Naruto would have in one day, which, many of you may know without me telling you, is quite a numerical count. I did, but as to whether he will succeed or not is entirely up to his own ability. Noticing the satisfied expression that his wife portrayed, he continued to have his fill of her gorgeous body. As another note, the females that are married in the family will only receive pleasure from their husbands. They despise the idea of being unfaithful to their significant other. That is perhaps why the female demons in the Kyubi family are the most sought after. This also clarifies why such high levels of love and devotion exist between Naruto and Kyubi. Though, perhaps in the case of Kyubi and Naruto, this rule doesn't really apply. Kyubi loved Naruto unconditionally and would do absolutely anything for him. It didn't matter if Naruto wasn't the epitome of perfectionism in the eyes of her mother. To her, Naruto-kun was perfect. To her, she wouldn't desire to marry any other man. Kyubi would be ready to defy her family's wishes if it meant that she could stay with her Naruto-kun. That was how much she desired her Naruto-kun, perhaps even more. With Naruto, with their intimate involvement now behind them, both participants just held onto each other. They were left to lament in their memories of how much they desired to have another round. Noticeably unfocused eyes trailed their significant other's appealing body. Usually after participating in a session, both Naruto and Kyubi would stay cuddled against each other. The doorbell suddenly halted all movement between the two. Naruto-kun, do you want me to go get it? Kyubi had to take into consideration the fact that Naruto was still injured, although most of the more serious wounds healed already. She still had to be cautious. Though, there was no way Naruto would allow his wife to do his job. Being courteous to a female was in his blood. Kyubi-chan, stay here, I'll go check it out. Naruto had to get out of bed sooner or later, so it might as well be sooner. After all, being tardy wasn't desirable for his overall physical health. He begrudgingly released Kyubi. Slothfully, he crawled out from under the covers. As a final sign of parting, Naruto nibbled Kyubi's ear. This was another one of her very sensitive areas that provided the utmost pleasure for her. Unsatisfied by his attempt, Kyubi moved slowly towards his lips. Though, she was a little late. Naruto had already placed his index finger to delay her advance. Naruto was evil, to leave his own wife yearning for a kiss was just too cruel and inhumane. Though, that was one of the many reasons why Kyubi was so addicted to him. His wittiness often provided a layer of complex humor. Added to that were his physical attractiveness and intellectual prowess. To Kyubi, Naruto was a combination of positives she just couldn't turn down. To her, Naruto was the ideal husband. She could only say one thing. I'll get my kiss sooner or later. Afterwards, her arms slowly maneuvered to encircle her own body in an embrace of sorts. She desired Naruto's scent to be near her at all times. It was what provided her company when Naruto had to leave for work. Turning the knob slowly, Naruto gently eased the door open. Who could it possibly be? This was indeed an interesting question. Naruto knew that it couldn't be his mother, seeing as she wouldn't need to signal her entrance. After all, a master key to every door in the mansion did have its advantages. Besides, Tsunade didn't usually come home until late into the evening. The sight that greeted him on the opposite end was a female. It was a sight that normal males would treasure, but to Naruto, he saw it as nothing really special. Even though she did possess the famed reputation of turning every man that ever proposed or simply requested a date down. Yes, The female in question was indeed the genjutsu specialist of Konoha. Kurenai senpai, what are you doing here? Naruto was confused. He didn't request a meeting with her, and since he knew of her personality, he could confirm quite easily that she wasn't the type that would make a house call. Naruto-kun, may I come in? With that, Kurenai pushed past Naruto as she came in uninvited. Again, she took her own seat before being shown one. Now, Naruto was very polite to a female, that was his trait, but it was severely strange that one such as Kurenai would actually act so openly towards him and in his own house too. Nevertheless, he disregarded it as a sign of common bonding of sorts. Taking his own seat from across her, Naruto poured some refreshments. Having Tsunade, who was strict about everything, had shaped him into refinement, however reluctant he was to engage in the change, it couldn't be helped. Proper manners were a must in front of Tsunade. Though that was no surprise, was it? Clearing his throat, Naruto attempted to dissolve this awkward silence. He hated attending formal dining occasions mainly due to his inability to fit in. All the people there were either from the prestigious clans of the village or the village council members. Either way, it wasn't very comfortable to be in that kind of environment. Instead, Naruto opted to snuggle with his Kyuubi-chan while watching some quality television. Moreover, any formal situation was tough for him to handle. If I may ask, Naruto was about to continue his question when Kurenai intercepted him. No need, Naruto-kun, the truth is, a bunch of the senior shinobi are meeting up to party, and it'd be really great if, Kurenai hid her blush. Well, what exactly was she doing? Was she asking him out? That's impossible, she was known for her brutal rejections to any man, how could she go soft now? The sad or perhaps humorous part was that Kurenai was in denial. Sure, in public, she would make an idiot of Naruto, but secretly, she harbored feelings of affection for the youngster. She had gotten the chance to work with him personally on several occasions. Each time, she discovered something incredible about his overall character. Naruto's magnetic charm had the sickest effect on any women, the kind that would make a wife experience ecstasy and bystanders incredibly jealous. It was no wonder that even the Ice Queen of Konoha would be enthralled. Kurenai was blushing deep down inside, quite helplessly actually, like that of a love-sick schoolgirl. No offense, of course. Wait, are you inviting me to join you guys? Naruto was speechless, he didn't know what to make of the request. This was Kurenai after all. She was notorious for playing pranks on people to make them look like total buffoons. Slowly taking a sip of her tea, she mingled with the aromatizing flavors it offered to her. It was a subtle taste, not too strong, yet not too bitter either. She found it strange at first, she usually only liked her brand of custom-made packages, yet she enjoyed this kind as well. Was everything related to Naruto irresistible to a certain extent? Did his infectious charm affect even inanimate substances? That was the question that Kurenai mused with at this point. Please do continue on, Kurenai-san, his words jabbed into her, like a dagger bent on taking her life. Using formalities with her when Tsunade had intentions of wedding the two of them was quite painful. She almost coughed, but quickly suppressed her agitation. Putting her cup down, only for it to be refilled again, she continued. This time a lot less attached. Yes, of course. So are you interested or not? Kurenai took on an expression of indifference, perhaps she was trying too hard, she was used to having guys reduced to her feet, so she had never really attempted to actively pursue them. First, when is this gathering taking place? Naruto was dedicated to his wife, he wasn't going to take any chances here. It would break her heart, he aimed to be the perfect husband and even perhaps father. It's really quite funny actually, Kyuubi suddenly brought the subject to attention and since then, it was never dissipated again. Both of them really desired to have multiple children, though, Naruto never really saw himself as the father character. If the destination was a bar or even some sort of dining establishment, then Naruto had to turn it down. He didn't like the taste of alcohol, and he gets drunk easily. When combined with peer pressure, these two elements could only escalate into regretful situations. That was, of course, undesirable. We're meeting at the new place that they just opened. I hear that they serve really cheap drinks. That was the end of all conversation concerning this matter. Once Naruto heard, drink, he knew he couldn't go. Sorry, Kurenai-san, but I can't drink. Naruto wasn't ashamed at admitting this seemingly unmanly component about his being. In fact, he had absolute resolve. A man didn't need to drink alcohol to impress a female. If every man in the village consumed 50% less alcohol, then it would be probable that the number of drunken rapes and beatings would drop significantly. Though, being a man had certain expectations. Oh, there was a noticeable amount of depression in her voice. This perfect opportunity was ruined. Now any plans she might have had were lost. I guess it's okay then, I'll leave you the address in case you change your mind. With that, Kurenai shuffled over a piece of decorative paper. She sipped the last of her tea as she stood and straightened her delicate fabric. Soft clothing was very tiresome to take care of. They were great to wear, but when it came down to maintaining their perfection, it was a whole different matter. Naruto conversely, also stood. He was always taught to send visitors off whenever they had any. For the next few moments, nothing in the form of dialogue was exchanged between the two people. Silence crept into the room and stuck it there. I hope you change your mind, Naruto-kun, I really do. Perhaps this was her way of convincing him to join. Naruto, on the other hand, didn't return anything. He kept quiet. He didn't want to be inconsiderate of her feelings, but there was a line that he daren't cross. Instead, he opted to laugh nervously. Anything that could ease the tension would be welcomed with a warm reception. Upstairs, Kyubi pressed her foxy ears to the wooden flooring. Having ultra-sensitive hearing, she could pick up even the faintest of sounds. Being that her husband was talking normally only strengthened the penetration. I'm so proud of you, darling. Truthfully, when Kyubi first heard him talking to another female, she had contemplated going down and stopping the conversation. Though, she should have known that Naruto could resolve this by himself. She already promised herself that she wouldn't take any chances. The mere thought of how devoted Naruto was towards her made Kyubi experience a heated surge of ecstasy. A heavy blush again acquainted itself with her face. Baby, her voice trailed off as she sighed. She was very pleased at how this potential problem turned out. Her tail swaying gently in midair only complemented her appealing body more. She sucked on her nail as she imagined all the intimacy that would be shared later today. Whilst still listening to the events happening below, giggling to herself. It was nice having you visit Kurenai-san. Naruto would at least give her a farewell. That was the least he could do. He knew that she was displeased at his rejection, but he couldn't help it. He wasn't going to end up in an uncontrollable situation. Seemingly resolving the present issue, Naruto once again proceeded to climb the stairs, not knowing how he was going to be greeted. He just hoped that Kyubi wouldn't be too upset. Naruto's room. Upon entry, Naruto was met with a bone-crushing hug. Naru-chan, your problem-solving skills is as superb as ever, I see. Kyubi made sure to stress every syllable in his name for the added dramatic affect. Thanks for taking notice, honey. As to where the coupling pet names came from, that was still unsure. Though, did it really matter? If anything, calling each other by more intimate titles was an expression of further relationship development. Though, their level was already very, very high. Perhaps this was both a blessing and a curse, but Naruto found other females inadequate now. Ever since Kyubi accepted his marriage proposal, he had come to reject any other kind of feminine approach. Was this a good thing? He didn't know, but since Kyubi wanted his full attention, he couldn't very well deny her now, could he? Some might call that pampering, and it might very well be, but this was his wife. Of course he was going to pamper her. Naru-chan, carry me please. Kyubi was always so polite. Naruto absolutely loved that. Not to mention the obvious fact that she was one fine piece of work. Sweeping her off her feet, Naruto gently cupped her delicate frame, pressing it close to his own body. This was what you would call bridal-style carriage, and quite appropriate too, seeing as they were husband and wife now. Making sure to walk slowly as to not disturb Kyubi's comfort, Naruto placed her on his bed. There now, princess. There was mocking humor in his voice as he pulled a blanket loosely over her body. I have to repay my wife for taking care of me now, don't I? Naruto smirked as he kissed her on the forehead. No fair, Naru-chan, you still won't kiss me on the lips. Kyubi was never one to pout, but this time she made an exception. Her arms crossed in an act of joking defiance as she turned her head away. If you don't kiss me on the lips, then you can't kiss me at all. She made sure to add an extra humph at the end of her sentence. Using a snobby voice was not her style, she detested it. People who put themselves above all else were the worst kind. Though, she could do anything with Naruto, well, as long as it was mutually beneficial, of course. Oh, forgive me, my divine mistress. Unconsciously, this conversation had turned into role play. Kneeling down on one knee, Naruto awaited for further instructions. Catching on to the implied game at hand, Kyuubi acted on her honorable queen status. You're quite the lucky one, Naru-chan. Not one person has been offered this option before. Kyuubi lubricated her lips as she placed her palm on top of Naruto's head, bringing him slowly towards her. To an outsider, this act would appear like total possession, and not the good kind either, but Kyuubi made sure to be as gentle with the grasp as possible. She couldn't dream of ever hurting her lover. She enveloped her precious blonde, as she snuggled up against him. All the while making sure that appropriate eye contact was kept between the two. Give your mistress what she desires, Naru-chan. Naruto knew that escape would be futile, so instead, he gave in to the enticing scent, placing a passionate lip lock that lasted, about 1 minute or so. Your lips are so delicious, Kyuubi moaned on the receiving side as her fingers brushed multiple times through his blonde locks. Satisfied now, darling? Naruto smirked as he stayed put, buried in Kyuubi's soft pillows. Very Naruto-kun, but in all seriousness, I'm through with being your mistress. I would much rather be your wife. Kyuubi was a very kind-hearted female toward Naruto. She was by no means a dictator that only satisfied her own ambition. As many would likely suspect, demon females were usually depicted as seductresses. That was true for most of their species. By nature, demons were selfish. That was a fact. That didn't mean, however, that all were the same. For the most part, Kyuubi could be considered highly antisocial. She never did understand why other demons gossiped so much. To her, things like, "Did you hear about the engagement?" or, "They just had a child," were absurd. She couldn't care less about what others have achieved. Though, perhaps part of her negligence of these hot topics in the demon realm was due to her being single. Much to her own dismay, she would get envious of other females. Naruto was her savior from a life of lonesome desires that could never be fulfilled. She never had the eyes for anyone other than Naruto. To her, it was a critical aspect of a matured woman to choose who she wanted to spend her eternal life with. That was the basis of fundamental freedom. She couldn't let her parents decide for her. Part of growing up was making decisions on your own. She couldn't have made a better choice. Through spending time with Naruto-kun, she had grown inseparable from him. Not to make herself appear weak or anything of that sort, but she couldn't deny the fact that, if she was to become separated for more than a few hours, or at the most, a few days, she would undoubtedly break down in tearful nostalgia. When it came to Naruto, she would always blame herself if anything was to happen. Though really, Naruto wasn't perfect. He still had a lot to learn, but at the same time, it's that ability of his to accept his mistakes and change that distinguishes him. Unknowingly, Kyuubi had taken on professions that she had no intention to partake in. Sure, her #1 title as wife was unquestionably authentic, but coupled with that was other jobs, all inclusive of in the title. It was like a package deal. Kyuubi loved it. She was as much Naruto's wife as she was his wet nurse. This, on the most basic terms, meant that Kyuubi was lactating. Conversely, she offered him nourishment when a need for it arose. To Kyuubi, Naruto was her baby. Truthfully, Naruto could very well be considered her newborn when a comparison of age came up, though that's beside the point. In terms of nourishment, milk was offered. Oh, not just the normal type of bottled milk. To many demons it would be a privilege if they could taste this. Yes, it was Kyuubi's own. Now, this may appear to be a very dirty action, and under normal circumstances it would rightly be viewed so. The difference here was that, both of them needed it. Believe or not, Naruto had to have more calcium intake. Tsunade had personally conducted a physical examination, and what she discovered was indeed very grim. Naruto's skeletal structure was very fragile. It was because of lack of calcium that such an occurrence presented itself. Though really, that's no surprise, seeing as nobody cared enough to offer assistance when the problem first congregated. As for Kyuubi herself, part of it was for the sheer chemistry shared when they engaged in, but it was also due to her limitless production of that she was able to do this continuously. I don't really have to stress that demons are different from humans now, do I? On a lighter note, however, it was also practice. They were going to have children after all, and feeding was essential for babies. Not to mention that, if the milk is not suckled, Kyubi would have to undergo suffering. If the lactated milk stays within a female's system for over an extended period of time, pain will be the after effect. Naruto just couldn't have that happening. Isn't it time for your daily intake of calcium, Naruto-kun? A sly smile played onto Kyubi's features as she slipped her right arm behind her back. Seconds later, her fur bra came loose. Perky jiggled only slightly as they popped out into the open. Now Naruto-kun, please drink up. She arched her back forwards a bit as she positioned her in front of Naruto's mouth. It was her invitation to feast. But, Kyubi-chan, I can always just drink bottled milk. Naruto always said the exact same line right before, plunging himself. It was a little game they played to set the mood. Not to mention that, they were out of bottled milk anyway. In turn, Kyubi also responded. You can't do that, Naruto-kun, is a lot better than that packaged stuff. Indeed so, was the best and purest of all milk. It was unhindered by bacteria. Due to the immediate suction after secretion, it maintains its top quality. Raw sweetness was its only flavor. If you really want me to, then, Naruto took a deep breath as he slowly lowered his head. Positioning his lips so that it encompassed her left nipple, his teeth closed in on the meaty protrusion. Now, if this was any other man, they would immediately suck hard. Though really, Kyubi would kill them before they got their greasy hands on her. Naruto was different. He cared for her pleasure more than his own. He gently bit the tip in some of effective arousal, periodically inhaling to draw forth the liquid. It was so comforting, any contact with Naruto would send Kyubi spiraling into the insane release of her bodily fluids. This was the primary reason for the wetness of bed sheets every time milking ended. Well, that and the dripping from the overflow value. Soft whimpers gave evidence to the amount of intimacy created. Naruto-kun, you're such a wonderful boy. She was taking on a motherly tone as her arms encircled his head. She just couldn't resist anymore. Laying kisses all over his exposed flesh. No one was going to lay a finger on her husband. Blissfully maintaining eye contact with his blonde streaks, she tightened her embrace. Can I try something, Naruto-kun? There came no reply in the form of understandable wording, but a shuffling in between her gave her the permission to go ahead. Grasping some of his hair, she enveloped it into her mouth, savoring the taste that seemed distinctly familiar. Kyubi enjoyed herself immensely. Her left hand cupped Naruto's cheek as she caressed it. It was her way of encouraging him to drink more. How is it, Naruto-kun? Isn't it delicious? She giggled cutely as her head came to a restful halt on top of Naruto's lovable cranium. Drink slowly, Naruto-kun, don't rush. There was that endearing voice again. Usually for many people, this would be the perfect setup for a night of hot. Logically so too, the current act would be considered what experienced people in this field call foreplay. Followed soon after is the entree. Though, for Naruto and Kyubi, everything had its own place and time. For both of them, the suckling of milk was professional business. After all, Naruto needed calcium. Plus, they had plenty of other opportunities to explore their sides. Though, there was indeed no denying the presence of pleasure in this act either. At Tsunade's front door, I guess it's time. Neji had been previously assigned the burdening task of informing Naruto that his mother wanted some sort of private meeting with him concerning something. He was ever so ready and willing to assist his best friend, but this was way below him. Why oh why did he have to be at the administration building when Tsunade was pissed? Was it his fate to be chosen for such a lowly task? Damn it, Neji, you promised to never talk fate shit again. He attempted to offer himself a motivational speech of sorts as he prepared to ring the door. Ever since his defeat by Naruto, Neji had gained a whole new perspective on life. Quite remarkable that a stoic guy like him could alter his behavior this much. It was truly astounding. No longer dwelling in the past, he took the initiative to change. First thing was his ideal mindset. That stuff about predetermination of individual social rank was complete gibberish. One interesting thing that came out of all this was the acquirement of the going steady status with Tenten. Yes, they had finally realized their hidden potential. Though, it wasn't really concealed that well anyway. Many people had begun to suspect some sort of affair when Tenten started having frequent visitations. Quickly shaking his head in some affect of ridding himself of the mental imaginary, Neji inhaled deeply. He held his breath as if he was somehow nervous. Here I go. Seconds later, the tip of his index finger established contact with the doorbell. Inside, having their session broken abruptly left a certain female very agitated. Now who is it? Kyubi hated interruptions, it was just so rude. Luckily, Naruto was there to dissolve her frustration. Now honey, you know that getting angry doesn't solve anything. Naruto knew exactly how to humor her when she felt down in the dumps, so to speak. Very reluctantly, both of them released each other. I'll go check it out. Don't be too long. Kyubi still wanted to finish what they started. There was no way that such an event could be passed up. She slowly shifted her position into a more revealing pose. You're very good with your mouth, Naruto-kun. The sensation of warmth was still very much present on her soaked nipples. It only served as more incentive for him to hurry. She couldn't just leave things hanging like this. She craved for more. I won't be. With that as the parting message, Naruto winked and proceeded downstairs once again. Upon reaching his destination, he matted down his roughed-up hair. Being buried in those made him feel a certain blissful dizziness that just didn't go away. It was indeed a wonderful experience. Slowly opening the door, this time he was met with a male visitor, or more accurately, one of his best buddies. Neji, what can I do for you? Naruto tried to sound as enthusiastic as possible, but in reality, it took a hell lot out of him. All he wanted right now was to spend some quality time with Kyubi. Any more house calls and he would have to ignore them. All in all, these interruptions were too tiresome for him. Upon first glance, Neji could tell that he came at an inconvenient time. Despite Naruto's purest intention of looking more presentable for his guest, he still had a long way to go. Being that his shirt was entirely disoriented and seemingly dysfunctional at this exact moment offered proof to his claim. I'll make this quick, Naruto, since you seem to be enjoying something very private right now. Getting a blush equivalent to that of his cousin Hinata's validated the suspected. Tsunade-sama would like to request an audience with you at this present time. Neji was always so professional that it was a mystery as to how the two of them ever became friends. Thank you, Neji, I'll be right out. Will you be accompanying me? Responding with the appropriate amount of politeness, Naruto waited for a response. I would love to, but unfortunately I have some urgent business to attend to. Their conversations were always filled with smug remarks that it almost appeared as though they were in some sort of disagreement, but then again, to deal with intelligent people, you had to be intelligent yourself. Thus, after one final farewell, they parted ways for the day. Closing the door behind him, Naruto leaned onto it for some sort of support. Kyubi-chan is so going to kill me for this. Sighing, Naruto prepared himself. Upstairs. I suppose you've heard, darling. Naruto had a regretful expression. It was truly a shame that such a lovely moment had to be cut short without any real conclusion. Exhaling a sigh, Kyubi answered to the best of her ability. Don't feel down, baby, we can always finish when we come back. Reorganizing herself, she plopped off the bed. Oh, and sorry for wetting your sheets. At this Naruto giggled a bit. He didn't know why exactly, but everything she said was so adorable to him. No worries, Kyubi-chan, it's just the sheets. You can even drench me for all I care. Now that was unexpected. There was a slight pause, as a blush that increased in intensity gradually appeared on Kyubi's features. Naruto-kun, you pervert. Her voice was that of a tease, no serious harm done. The thing is, females liked it when their own husbands acted perversely toward them when in privacy, but open perverts were a whole different issue. This would undoubtedly explain why the Toad Hermit was currently in rehabilitation at the Konoha hospital. You're coming with me, right, Kyubi-chan? There was just no way that Naruto could abandon Kyubi again, once was already too many. That and the fact that her being all alone was too dangerous, even despite her full capability of defending herself. Of course I am. Just give me a sec. Having a sudden recollection that she had to conceal her fox appearance while in the open, Kyubi did as Naruto once instructed her to. This sort of thing was child's play for someone of her stature, but still, she knew it was for her own safety, and for that, she was thankful. Actually, Kyubi-chan, can you turn into anything other than a human? Don't take this the wrong way. What I mean is, can you turn into some sort of small fox or something? You see, I still haven't introduced you to my mother yet. So if she sees me with such a lovely specimen, I'll be under critical questioning later. Naruto scratched the back of his head as he averted his gaze. Despite what Kyuubi wanted, she obliged. In truthfulness, she wanted to get integrated into his family as soon as possible. Being able to kick it off, as they say, with your mother-in-law was crucial to furthering her relationship with Naruto. After all, if one side of the family sees the other as unfit, then nothing positive could ever come of it. Though, as with many newlyweds, the prospect of making the perfect impression on the most influential person in another family is often nerve-wracking. Kyuubi sincerely hoped that Naruto's mother would accept her. Only for you, Naruto. Having no need to form hand signs, she poured chakra into her system. Having the perfect image of transformation already set up in her mind, she easily manipulated her limitless source of energy to her liking. Seconds later, reappearing as the cuddliest silver-furred kitsune, tipped off with a bit of crimson at the edge of her tail. Appearance didn't really matter to her. As long as Naruto liked it, then everything was fine. Absolutely gorgeous, that was indeed all Naruto could muster, being too captivated by the beauty, yet simplicity of the overall design. He slowly crouched down as he offered her an arm to climb. Responding immediately, Kyuubi set into motion. Her every twitch of the body was marvelous. The way her forelegs moved with expert delicacy, only making the slightest tap whenever she established contact with the solid flooring. Tail swaying from side to side as if carried by a wisp of wind, her hind legs stood proud, accenting the hidden muscles that many would not suspect to be there. It was truly an example of female strength. Snuggling into Naruto's shirt, she smothered herself in his scent. Sleep tight, Kyuubi-chan. Holding a hand close to the bulge in his shirt, Naruto attempted to offer some support. After reorganizing himself, involving a fresh change of clothing, Naruto proceeded to meet his mother. Whatever she wanted to talk about must have been important since she rarely requested personal meetings. Some random street. Where could Kyuubi-hime possibly be? Yes, we all should know who he is by now. The idiot currently attempted to rejuvenate his traveled souls as he rested at a street-side vendor. Quite a common sighting actually. Business people from all around came to Konoha to strike it rich. Seeing as it was one of the 5 mainstream villages, it did offer quite a lot of success for entrepreneurs. Though really, walking for a couple of hours could hardly be considered traveling far. Perhaps the royal treatment this guy's gotten while in the demon realm has spoiled him. I'd never expect the human world to have such humid temperatures, my feet are blistering, and it's quite uncomforting. Sipping some refreshing green tea, the demon attempted to rid him of the oncoming heat. Though, you really would expect such a high and mighty being to be impervious to such petty conditions. How great it would be to have with a female right now. Speaking out loud instead of conjuring it as a thought, he managed to attract some very disgusted looks from others sharing the same territory. He really should learn to keep his mouth shut sometimes, it'd save him a lot of trouble. At this exact same instant, Naruto passed by the street vendor. Still indulging in his erotic fantasies, the demon failed to notice that the subject of his affection had passed him by, meaning, his own proclamation about reacquiring her love was but a farce. He was the typical type that went after outward appearance and who valued above all other priorities of life. Finally deciding that he has wasted enough time, the demon continued his search. Being that he was suffering from some effect of a heat stroke, his head severely ached. This, coupled with that bash he received, tripled his pain. He headed in the direction opposite that of his supposed Kyuubi-hime. He wasn't seriously in love with Kyuubi, it was simply because she had an ultra-hot body that he went after her. This guy didn't know what true love was. He just assumed that was the language of love. Quite the uneducated person, wasn't he? He would soon come to the realization of the futility of his chase. At the hot spring, having changed out of his usual attire of specialized ninja clothing, Naruto opted to wear something simple. Black shorts and a dark blue t-shirt. He had a very good taste in color. The combination of black and blue were complementary. For the life of him, he didn't understand why he was so dumb as a kid. Orange was a disgusting color to wear, and what's worse, he wore it all the time. Though, it wasn't like he had any other choice for clothing. He was truly pitiable as a child. His overall appearance was nothing less than total attractiveness. The bandaged ankles and wrists really worked to add flair to his already appealing body. After all, this was a meeting with his mother. Being that the temperature was rather unforgiving, if you will, Naruto had no choice but to expose as much flesh as possible. No longer wearing his ninja sandals, Naruto went with personalized straw slippers. This, of course, exposed the flawless design of his feet, almost matching that of Kyuubi's, though in comparison, his still had a ways to improve on. He prepared himself thoroughly before taking another step. Back with the demon. Seemingly devoid of any sort of destination, the demon became sidetracked quite frequently. Often wandering into shops, and taking pleasure in talking to passing, delectable female personnels. If he was going to retrieve Kyuubi, then he really should hurry. Though, according to his philosophy, you have to enjoy yourself. Oh, look at that, she's quite a woman. Eyeing a certain crimson-eyed genjutsu mistress, the demon couldn't help but get aroused. Kurenai's plans were all ruined. If Naruto didn't show up to the party, then what was the point in her going? She didn't really fancy the idea of spending time with a bunch of people in a bar. The air in those establishments often made her lightheaded anyway. Just touching upon her rejection made her uneasy. Nobody could resist her. She was the Uehi Kurenai. No man has ever resisted her temptation before. Still submersed in her constant mental bickering, she accidentally bumped into our clueless demon friend. With a crash, she fell to the ground. This was quite annoying. The guy should have made way for her. It was common courtesy. Watch where you're going. Irritation was getting the better of her now. Well, look what we have here. A malicious smirk played onto the demon's features as more of a bulge appeared in his leather pants. Back with Naruto. I'm here to meet Tsunade-sama. The Anbu standing guard took one look and granted him entrance. Taking into consideration the emptiness of the entire bathhouse, Naruto logically assumed that it was rented out for the privatized use of the Hokage. Cupping his face in nervousness, Naruto rehearsed the proper greeting. Tsunade was very much a perfectionist. She would never allow screw-ups. That was why Naruto had to be serious about this. Alright, I think I got this, Naruto sighed as he proceeded through the female corridor. With every step, it seemed as if his impending doom was fast approaching. How was he going to face his mother and manage not to crack a joke or two about her humongous? His natural curiosity of the female anatomy would surely take his logical side. Dearest, I may be asleep, but I can still hear what you're contemplating, there was a deathly threat conveyed in her voice. Yet, at the same time, Naruto could tell she was kidding around with him. Kyuubi may be outside of Naruto's body now, but they were still very much connected telepathically. No worries, Kyuubi-chan, I'm not that perverted. At this, both husband and wife released a laugh. It served a dual purpose actually. Sure, that was a wise remark, but more importantly, it was to release some of the nervousness pent up on the inside. Don't worry, honey, I'm sure you'll do great. At last, the inevitable came, there was no turning back now. Staring them in the face was the grand wooden blockade that sealed off the hot spring area. It was time to confront his mother. However scared he might have been, Naruto knew that this was an obstacle that had to be overcome. He was a man, he needed unwavering confidence at times like these. Yet somehow, he had the sickening sensation of shaking. Back with the demon. You're quite dashing, young lady, would you find it to your liking if an invitation to dine was given? He was a swindler, trying to be gentlemanlike to lure someone to get drunk. Though, the use of his high societal language was certainly welcome. At first, Kurenai thought of an instant rejection. With further consideration, however, she changed her mind. This was the perfect chance to make Naruto experience painful jealousy. That'd teach him to love her for sure. Why not? You seem well educated, and you know how to compliment a female. Kurenai had very high expectations for anyone she dated after all. This was to be expected. Oh my god, I can't believe that pick-up line I got from Daily Dates actually came in handy. Perhaps 5,000 demon dollars was worthy. It would seem that a self-correction is in order. The line wasn't even his, and all this time, he prided himself off of his superior education, quite sad actually. Lapping an arm around Kurenai, the demon led her to a nearby bar. With Naruto. Mother, did you want to see me? Cautiously peeking around the corner, he sighted the target. Luckily, steam made the majority of what he saw inconclusive, leaving him to imagine most of it. Good thing Naruto wasn't perverted. Sipping some sake, Tsunade smirked. Oh yes, Naruto-kun, step out into the open. I have an important request to make. Setting down her drinking cup, Tsunade splashed some water onto her face. Soaking in a hot spring rejuvenated tiresomeness, but at the same time, because of the temperature, it made many people quite sleepy. Perhaps this offered reason to her action. Fidgeting a bit uneasily, Naruto tiptoed across the solid surface. Yes, mother. Naruto-kun, I know you dislike conflict of any sort, but I want you to consider taking part in this year's senior Junin selection exams. You've already stayed an underclassman to the others for too long. Unbeknownst to Naruto, Tsunade had another reason for her decision. If Naruto was able to do well in this examination, then that would undoubtedly increase his chances with one of the two ladies. It was her own of assisting her son with his singular problem, as she coined it. You don't have to answer me right now, but I want you to at least give it some thought. Tsunade knew of Naruto's overall inactiveness when it came to meaningless squabbles, but this was important to his success in his love life. Mother, I don't know if I can live up. He daren't go any further. Lowering his head in shame and defeat, Naruto sighed as he nodded to her idea. I guess I'll consider it. That's my good boy. Having almost guaranteed his participation, Tsunade felt the need to congratulate herself. Pouring some sake again, she sipped it slowly. Is there anything else, mother, or can I be dismissed? Naruto felt the need to cool his head, being slightly lightheaded due to prolonged exposure in the heated environment. It was hard for him to breathe, the sulfuric essence was a bit too strong for his liking. It never ceased to amaze just how durable Tsunade-sama was. She was able to stay in these springs for a very long time. He definitely knew that he couldn't. Though, he was immensely glad that this meeting was finally adjourned. Naruto had always found it difficult to engage in a conversation of any sort with grown-ups. Perhaps some would call this immaturity, but for his own personal tastes, he would much rather describe it as preferences of the youthful. Bowing in respect, Naruto bided his mother farewell. Oh, something just occurred to me. What exactly is that bulge in your shirt? All this time Naruto had been desperately trying to conceal Kyuubi from sight. Though, he severely underestimated Tsunade's keen observational skills. He would just have to make something up and fast. I found this little guy one day and have been taking care of it ever since. That was a horrible excuse. Would Tsunade see the falseness in his wording? All Naruto could do was hope for the best. Raising an eyebrow as if to evaluate whether or not he was indeed genuine, Tsunade smirked. Please believe me. Please. If she found out about Kyuubi, then it was all over. How many times do I have to tell you to take care of your pets? Oh good, at least she didn't suspect anything. Feeling quite relieved, Naruto internally thanked the heavens. But mother, I always take care of anything and everything with the utmost care. Naruto retorted childishly. He was one of the most organized people he knew. There was no way that he would neglect any of his cared ones. A devious smile signaled Tsunade's comeback. Really now, I seem to vaguely recall that your rabbit friend ran away from you. Naruto didn't know what to say, he was beaten completely today. Who knew that a gambling alcoholic could be so smart? Blushing heavily, Naruto turned away as his index fingers poked each other. Very Hinata-like indeed. A hearty laugh was Tsunade's only response. I'm just kidding, Naruto-kun. Just make sure to take care of it this time. Afterwards, Tsunade went back to enjoying her sake. Anyways mother, I'll be going now. Naruto bowed yet again as he whirled away in a flurry of leaves. With the demon, would you like anything to drink? The demon was making his move on Kurenai. He needed a human to show him around this world anyway. He didn't exactly fancy the idea of having an ugly person being his tour guide. He was one of those picky, choosy types of people that wanted nothing but the absolute best in quality. Anything below perfection was second rate. Though, with his skills and assets, or more precisely the lack of, could he even afford being smug? Anything mild would be nice. Kurenai had her own reasons for dating this guy. After this, she would spread the word of being taken. That way, Naruto would have to come crawling back to her. At that point, she would ditch this guy. It was the perfect plan. She would be able to reap the full benefits of both worlds. Who knew Kurenai could be so low? Barkeep, 2 glasses of your best vodka please. If vodka was considered mild, then one had to question what would be classified as strong. Again, demons in all respects were more capable than humans. This included consumption of alcohol. Coming right up, any customers were welcome in this kind of business. Filling the glass halfway, the bartender handed them each of their respective drinks. If I may, beautiful, can I borrow your drink for a few seconds? You can never be too sure as to the contents of these things. Acting on seduced impulse, Kurenai handed her drink to the demon. He slowly turned away, making sure that his planned course of action was well concealed from view. The demon dropped some sort of dissolvable pellet into the liquid. Watching as it fizzed away, the demon smirked. Sorry for the terrible wait, beautiful, I hope you weren't too upset. His romantic language really took Kurenai by surprise as she wallowed in the constant compliments about her appearance. It was really quite natural for a female to draw comfort from how others viewed her. Little did she know, her life would be forever changed as of today. Honey, I'd say you handled that situation quite professionally. Having awoken from her nap, Kyuubi now laid uncaringly on top of Naruto's head. His hair was so soft that it made the perfect nest for her. Why, thank you. Naruto couldn't help but brush her fur. It was the least he could do after she accompanied him. He wasn't entirely sure, but part of him knew that the reason behind the smoothness of the meeting was because Kyuubi was there for him. He could have handled it by himself, but it'd be nowhere near as speedy as this. It was his way of offering thanks. Shall we go home, Kyuubi-chan? Continuing his run-through of her fur, Naruto chose a faster method of locomotion. Jumping onto a nearby building, he proceeded to kick it into hyperdrive. At the bar, I just couldn't help but notice every movement of your muscle when you drink. It's really quite charming. It was only a matter of time now. The servant drug, as he described it, was his ultimate device when chick hunting. Once the drug enters their system, it rapidly destroys any defiance they might have. As to exactly how this effect was possible, even he himself wasn't sure. Though really, he wasn't into reading boring labels. He'd much rather experience everything firsthand. A noticeable squint showcased that the drug was indeed taking effect. How is your drink, madam? The demon had to keep a straight face to make it seem as though everything was normal. Inside, however, he could barely restrain his own erotic excitement. This was going to be great. He's never had with a human chick before. He was quite repulsive, wasn't he? For him to talk about his so-called absolute love for his Kyuubi Haim, only to have an affair with someone he would consider to be of an inferior race was quite the contradiction. Though, it wasn't like he lived by morals anyway. Finishing her drink, Kurenai put down her glass. Turning slowly to face the man beside her, she found his scent to be extremely attractive. May I ask for your name? Responding immediately like the intercourse-deprived freak he was, the demon gladly gave Kurenai his name. Seeing as she was under his control now, nothing negative could come of it. Why, of course, I'd gladly acquaint myself with one as marvelous as you. It's Akuma. Well, this was indeed a surprise. For those of you that may not know, Akuma in its simplest translation was demon. Quite fitting actually, seeing as he was indeed only a lowly gatekeeper demon anyway. He would have no need for superfluous titles. Akuma-sama, please use me as you wish. That was the expected reply. It signaled the dominance of the drug. That's a good girl. Now tell me, do you know of this person? The demon retrieved a picture of some sort. Showing it to Kurenai, she immediately recognized that flawless face. It's Naruto-san. Notice that she also used formalities now, quite a change she's taken on, hasn't she? I see that you know him. He wasn't very acute, was he? Of course she knew who Naruto was, otherwise she wouldn't have blurted out his name. The demon really needed to pay more attention. Who knew that this guy had a short memory? Now be a good little girl and take me to him. The demon no longer used his sophisticated voice, seeing as there was no longer a need for it. After all, this human was his servant now, so it didn't make much of a difference. Yes, Akuma-sama. With that, both servant and master exited the bar, paying the required amount of money for their drinks. It was only a matter of time before the two of them would meet. In front of Tsunade's house. I'm sorry for the constant interruptions today, Kyuubi-chan. Naruto knew how much Kyuubi desired to be alone with him. It was that exact realization that pained him so much. It just wasn't fair that people had to ruin a perfect setting. It was really a major mood killer. Don't worry, honey bunch, once we're in your room again, we can pick up where we left off. Kyuubi hated it when Naruto was in anguish over her. Though, the use of a brand new nickname was really nice. Honey bunch was usually reserved for couples that really knew each other well enough to feel comfortable doing stuff. Thanks for understanding. Afterwards, Naruto proceeded inside. Back with the demon. While Naruto was unlocking the door, on the other side of the house, something much more sinister was afoot. Is that his room? Since he didn't have a key and sucked at picking locks, he would just have to enter through the window. Yes, Akuma-sama. Kurenai was still under the influence of the drug, so she couldn't deny him. It was both strange and heartwarming to serve her master so obediently. Nice work. I'll be back in a bit. You wait here. Luckily for him, the window was open. Stealthily entering Naruto's room, the demon pulled a comfy chair to his current location. Might as well make myself comfortable while I wait. He was really inconsiderate. He failed to notice that he had scratched both the wooden flooring as well as some areas of an expensive carpet of sorts. Hearing the door to this room unlock, the demon managed the best, surprise, look who's here, expression he could muster. Opening the door to his room, Naruto stepped inside. Welcome Naruto-san, I have something very important to discuss with you.